sometimes, like I said, it catches me unawares, and then all of a sudden, oh, we're live. Oh yeah, we're live. We're live here. So hold on, folks. How are you guys doing, family? Welcome to the live stream. It's Friday Eve, or some may call Thursday. And I just want to welcome you guys all to the live stream. I got a wonderful guest today. I've got Short Season John. I've had him on. This will be his third time on the podcast. And yeah, I just want to say, guys, it's awesome. We're gonna maybe do a little bit. Obviously, we're gonna talk a little politics. We're maybe gonna talk a little bit about. We're gonna take some Q&A, and we're gonna kind of let the conversation flow. I need some help today, so I'm having Short Season John on here. Anyways, John, welcome to the show, brother.
Hey JT, good to see you again. Always fun to be back, and we have some awesome talks. So looking forward to this one again. Pretty excited.
Always, brother. And like I said, we've kind of had a tradition lately, and we're going to start with prayer. And so again, if you guys want to bow your heads, you guys don't have to, especially if you're driving or we don't want you to be distracted, whatever you're doing. If you need your eyes, use them, please. But I'm just going to give us a quick opening of prayer. So Heavenly Father, Lord, we just come today before you humbly, Lord. We just ask for your presence to be with us, or we ask for seeds to be planted. We ask for seeds to be watered, and we pray for, Lord, that the words coming out of John in my mouth, Lord, there'll be something that you want us to speak, and Lord, that they'll have a purpose, whatever it may be. Lord, we just pray for a blessing upon this audience. We pray a blessing upon John and our families, and we just pray, Lord, that you're edified. And then those who don't know you today, Lord, by the end of this podcast, potentially, Lord, they could. We ask all these things in the name of your Son, Jesus. Amen.
Yeah.
So yeah, brother. So I just wanted to have you on, just we can rap a little bit about current politics, and I wanted to say real quickly that. So I had a little issue with the channel. We've been doing the health podcast with Josh from Modern Roots Life, Josh Truex. We've been doing the ancient roots of life and wellness, and I got my first, not quite strike, but I got a warning. I had a video taken down by YouTube, and that's the first one I've had removed. That's probably only the second one I've ever had removed on this whole channel. Actually, no, I'll take that back. That's the third one. So unfortunately, there probably won't be any full ancient roots of life as far as the health and medical information, even though that's never what it was. And I don't even want to mention what it got taken down for. Let's just say I was very confused by it. So those things, the ancient roots of life and wellness, will definitely be on the audio only podcast. You'll also be able to get it on Patreon. So the video recordings, but we will still continue to put, like I said, it will still be a free show. It will be on Spotify, Apple, or wherever you get your audio podcast. But if you like the video, and this is not to say that Josh and I will not be still collaborating on podcasts that have biblical topics or anything like that. The truth is, I don't know what you can say when it comes to medical issues or supplement issues, health issues. I have no idea where the line is. And so, honestly, just be perfectly candid, I cannot take the risk of jeopardizing this channel when, like I said, the line is clear as mud as far as I'm concerned. So I don't even know. So, but if you guys do like the content, you do want to watch the Patreon, I've been putting more and more content on Patreon. In fact, today I just uploaded the latest episode of JT's Mixtape. Episode number 36 is available on Patreon. At this moment, it's early and it's uncensored. And believe it or not, believe it. This cut will not make it to YouTube because, of course, we talk about things that they would also probably get videos taken down. So if that's enticing for you, if you guys want us to speak candidly, that's what the Patreon's for. So if you want to support me in that way, that's a great way to do it, and also get you something in return. And also, again, I got the shirts. If you guys want to support this podcast, get yourself a Jesus Said There Be Haters shirt. And I'm sure you guys are looking at this nice new hat. These are not available for sale yet, but this is a prototype. So I was just telling John as we came on, this hat could potentially be available if you guys like it. It's just a plain fitted black hat with the JT Files JC logo on it. I might turn this into maybe a Jesus Said There'd Be Haters with maybe like this on the back, something like that. But let me know guys, if you guys are interested in hats. It's not a trucker hat, which is typically what I rock, but you know, I'm still trying to figure this out. I'm trying to figure all this stuff out, but I appreciate you guys' support, and I want to give a shout out to the members and patrons who obviously do support me. Members, I really do intend to do more for you guys soon. Hopefully, members only streams, but I'm still in the transition of the day job to this being my full-time gig. So please have some grace from me. I hope. Listen, I said I obviously. I'm stretched a little thin, if I'm being completely honest. So, but I do plan on, doing what I can for you guys. And with that out of the way, John, I want to ask you, how's it going, bro? And obviously, I want to give a shout out to Short Season John. He said he's been a little bit busy, but if you guys want to support his channel, obviously his link is in the description, so check him out. But what's going on, John?
JT, I mean, it's been a little bit. Life is life comes at you fast sometimes, right? And gives it to you all at once. I remember I went through this season of, for the first time ever, getting laid off and not having a job after, working my whole life. And then all of a sudden I got, this startup company, and it's more than I could have ever have asked for. So it's interesting how sometimes those things shift like that in life, right? But yeah, I wish I had more free time, I guess, and I'm envious that, you're still able to do all the stuff you can do and put out so much content. It's awesome, man. I just watched the episode with Vitaly on the Book of Enoch, and it's good stuff. It's great content. It's always thought provoking. So congrats to you.
Well, appreciate it, brother. Yeah, obviously I do try to do what I can. And, it's funny. I always bring back to my testimony before I was really doing endurance stuff. And I put way too much emphasis on that. And I've often said that. And so I had a surgery, and it was kind of like, God, if you heal me, I know you'd want me to kind of go return to do some of this stuff. And if you don't, I know that there's going to be another direction for me. And so this ended up being the other direction. Obviously, I had no idea at the time when I was praying to God. And so, yeah, I do rob Peter to pay Paul when I make all the content, because obviously I do have a day job, and that's why I'm not going to do it eventually, because yeah, I like to do as much of this as I can, and I've been trying to be super consistent. So yeah, I appreciate you. I appreciate everybody who obviously has supported me through all this stuff and finds anything that I do to be interesting or edifying or thought-provoking, because that's obviously what it's intended for. But I also appreciate guys like John who are not doing this full-time, who are still putting out stuff when they can, because that's how I started, and I think that's how everybody starts who probably is a legitimate person out here.
Right. I think it's like, I think the thing that really did it for me, it is this whole short season thing. Like, I don't remember the last time something moved me like this, right? And coming to this, this revelation that, like, wow, maybe all the stuff that was in there is real. It's not a bunch of myths or stories. And maybe the myths that I have been taught, that I have been told about, maybe that's about real stuff. and I don't know. So I feel like anytime I've never wanted to start a channel for anything else or put out a content for anything else in my life other than this one thing, right? So hopefully I can, God willing, continue and put out some stuff. I think my favorite is the architecture stuff, though. I mean, it's I was just in Nashville. We were talking about it a little bit before we got on, and yes, I do think that hat would be awesome, by the way. Just a quick soft plug there. But
cool.
We were walking around, and I said to my friend, I said, check out that brick building right there. And he looked and he said, what am I looking at here? And I explained the brick ribbon that went around on the window pane. And of course it was right there at the street level. And we just had like a whole discussion about this whole wire windows that low onto the ground. And you know, it is, I think, like one of the easiest things for people to latch onto is all the architecture stuff that makes you kind of wonder, right? Like you go down the Tartaria rabbit hole and there's a lot of different stuff and it makes you wonder. But yeah, I think if anything, architecture styled videos will probably be my thing.
Yeah, I'm just pulling up some stuff here, some historic buildings in Nashville, and yeah, it's of course it's like everywhere else. Of course, there's old world buildings in Nashville that don't really seem to fit, but
No.
but such as all of it is.
I mean,
oh wow, so there's a federal building. John, are you being able to see this stuff that I'm pulling up?
I think there might be a little bit of a delay here.
There's a little delay, but yeah, check out that one. It's like some old world post office or something.
Yes. It's you know, there's also this other thing about this whole tunnels thing, right?
Oh gosh, like I said, that's my favorite topic.
And I've read, you know, like where you see these people and they kind of talk about, hey, all of these things were for prohibition, basically. This was basically because people really wanted to drink. And so, like the movie Shawshank Redemption, right?
Oh, yeah.
We're basically going to dig tunnels everywhere, you know. But why would you dig all those tunnels that would go to the police station and to the courthouse and to everywhere else? Like that kind of doesn't seem like a good idea to do this, right? And like, where are all the big dirt mounds of you guys like digging out the tunnels? I mean, it's just so absurd when you really start to think about it a little bit, right? It just doesn't seem
well, right. That's the thing that I've always say. The thing about, I know that they always will bring up prohibition. Oh, and then speakeasies and underground places where they could either move booze or they could drink it. But again, did they predict that booze would be legal one day and then make the tunnels first? Because obviously they would not have time to make the tunnels during Prohibition to be able to use it, to be able to still consume and to sell alcohol. And that's the thing. It's like they just say what the tunnels were used for. But yeah, I don't doubt that they were used for all kinds of things. But that doesn't explain why they're there, because very clearly, if you were trying to do something hidden, you would not be able to dig the tunnels. And right. All the really popular, or not, the very prominent public buildings, even like if you go to a place like Richmond, Virginia, where me and my buddy Ricardo were recently, that all the state capitol building, this old post office, this other building, I'm not even exactly sure, this education building, whatever they are now, they all have tunnels to go between them. So there's an infrastructure of tunnels under the city. And now how far does it go? How vast is it? I mean, it's anybody's guess, but who knows? Look at this picture right here, John. This is in Nashville.
Listen, you can.
Does that look like muddy? Does that like dirty streets? And
we could slap that thing together in record time. You know, donkeys. You know, just.
But look, I mean, like you got, like, again, this is like this could be, put it this way. If I pulled that picture up and I said, John, where is that? It could really almost be anywhere. But it would probably get a long time before I mentioned Nashville, if ever.
Right. I mean, this is, I guess, you know, people, you know, it's interesting, right? You can kind of tell people and develop their mind of what they should think something looks like, right? And I think, number one, if you haven't done a lot of travel, well, you're kind of at an information disadvantage, right? You've just never seen these things before. But, you know, the internet opens up this view of you can see anything anywhere, right? There's even probably like a street view where you can like walk around and see really, really cool things. And I think that's when you can like piece it together, where you realize that like, no, that stuff is everywhere. It's not just in Europe. It's literally all over the world. I think there's a website, stolenhistory.net.
Oh yeah. I've seen that
right?
one.
And they just go over all the buildings, right, in all these countries that they're all identical, and it's kind of wild.
Yeah, let's take a look at that one right there. This one is particularly funny. It's some kind of courthouse in Nashville, of course, Greco-Roman, and then you just have donkeys, wagons, horses. I don't, if there's a car there, I'm not exactly sure. It looks like if there's a car there, it's obviously just a one or two off. It's pretty much all wagons and carts.
See, and there is a part of me that wonders now, after looking into this for a while, are all those people really there?
Oh, you know what? That's interesting. You say that. I guess I can do whatever I want because it's my show. But
Sure.
but I actually just saw a TikTok where it was showing something like that, the photo manipulation. And I was gonna maybe save this for a JT's mixtape, but I could probably just do both. But yeah, continue on that thought, because that's a great question. That what we see there. Sometimes, if you really actually examine these pictures, besides the whited out skies, it looks like some of the stuff is painted on. It's not a real picture altogether.
100%. I want to say the channel's Mind Unveiled, and there was like a whole 2-hour episode on old school Photoshop and the classes that they used to have, and how people would sit there with specialized tools. They would take multiple negatives, cut out the things that they wanted, and then they would layer these on top of each other to develop one image. And so you could, those images where you have like 300 people that are everywhere, when you really, really, really zoom in, it's like this horrible yearbook photo thing that's been taken out, and all these heads are just kind of like mashed together in this like almost weird Sergeant Pepper and what was that, the Beatles?
Oh yeah, I know what you're talking about. The
right,
Sergeant Peppers. Yeah,
it's just all the little heads, right? And that's kind of what these images look like when you zoom in on them, of World's Fairs, people going to like different places. That's kind of like what it looks like.
Would you like to watch a video from TikTok about
Absolutely.
that?
Absolutely.
I thought this is it's just so happen you talk about this, that yeah, this is a really interesting video right here.
Okay, I know some people have seen this picture before, but this is one of the weirdest pictures I've ever seen. You like scroll in on these people, this picture almost looks like AI. It is so weird. None of these people look like they're together. They're all looking in different directions. They don't even necessarily look like they're all standing there. Like, that lady does not look like she's like next to that guy. And what is he doing? They look so out of place. I have studied this picture. If anybody has like any kind of intuition or discernment at all, they know there was something up with this. This is not what a crowd photograph looks like. This is from 1893. Okay, so there's this guy. He's just like adjusting his suit. Everybody is doing different things. These two do not look like they're standing next to each other. They just don't. I don't know what it is about this picture. She's like overjoyed smiling at something. Like, this guy could care less. He's not even looking in that direction. Nobody's looking in the same direction.
Yeah, what do you think about that? I can't hear you. Let me see.
Oh, you got me now?
Yeah, can you?
Yeah. I think the delays might be a little bit longer.
Okay. Yeah. So what do you think about that? I mean, I would say that she's absolutely correct. That looks like Photoshop. I don't think anybody's like. There's no way that those people are together actually.
No, I'm really, really skeptical of these, and anything that we take as like historical evidence through one of these photos. I mean, it's one thing when you have, the artist depictions, which I will say are pretty good. I'm not sure who actually drew all those, landscape, like, large things, but it's phenomenal. But when you get down to the pictures, it kind of makes me feel that it was almost like JT and John were going to go around and they were going to take pictures and like, just make sure that we had all the pictures of this stuff. And then afterwards, somebody went in and put all these things in, right? It just doesn't seem like, it's very suspect to me. I feel like Photoshop has probably been around for a while, and we just didn't realize like how pervasive it was, because that the age old all of the iron workers having lunch on the iron beam hanging out over the city.
Oh yeah.
Well, that's not real, right? But there's people who would say that, and they would look at that, or I could even see people having that in their house and saying, "Man, people were really, they were strong back then, and they really were able to tame the elements and everything else." And it's like, wow, it's a lot harder to convince people they've been fooled than it is to fool people, I think.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. So some context, and I don't know if you guys could see based on just the picture from the video. It actually said the Columbia exhibition, which is people who talk about the old world in the funny business and Tartaria and all the things that we talk about. That is the most famous world fair. Maybe not the most famous one, but that's the one that's often shown. That's the one in Chicago in 1893. The other one, the big one, is I think is it 1896 in St. Louis? Is that right, John?
Yep.
Yeah. So that's the other really big one. But so what we're told, the narrative says, is there was millions of people went to these fairs. And so when you see the big pan back shots, it's really hard to tell. But yeah, this is like that kind of picture to me is that if you glanced at it, it's good enough to fool somebody. It's kind of like this, that the NASA tomfoolery is good enough to fool somebody who wants to be fooled, or who doesn't think that someone's trying to fool them. But upon closer inspection, like the NASA stuff is ridiculous, because you can once you start to see the trick, you can see it. And so that's the thing. What she said was absolutely correct, is that that's not how crowds react to each other, because there would definitely be people looking at each other. And when you see the close quarters involved in these people being like their faces almost touching, at some point, when you guys have been to a concert, you guys have been to a parade, you guys have been to whatever, some kind of large public gathering. And when you got people like shoulder to shoulder, elbow to elbow, and almost face to face, people are going to be looking at the same thing, or they're going to be looking at each other, and they're going to be reacting to each other. But literally, if you go look at that picture, and maybe I can pull up a still of it, it looks like everybody in that picture is looking at something different. It's just not realistic at all that that's the way it would be. I mean, there's just no way. It's like that everybody is either their eyes are going in different directions,
right? And
nobody is reacting to each other whatsoever. This guy in the middle over here, if you guys can see, he doesn't even look like he has any eyes.
Yeah, this is all just like a massive copy paste.
Yeah, it's kind of like when they do the globe, right? And they copy and paste the clouds.
And yeah, you have the same cloud formations 12 years apart. How is that possible?
Well, not only that, but you can see when they talk about the even the guys who literally admit to be NASA Photoshop people, they mention, oh well, yeah, it's Photoshop because it has to be, but they mention how they cut and paste the clouds, and so then when you actually look, you're like, oh yeah, that cloud is the same cloud that I see in more than one place.
Right. Yeah, I think I actually saw something about postcards, and like one of the like famous postcard companies, they had the same sky background that they would insert into all the postcards, and it was maybe like 4 or 5 different sky backgrounds that they would insert into all of their postcards. But this thing of like, inserting stuff into photos, I mean, like, as you look at all those people with all their hats on,
look at this guy's mouth. Is that a mouth right there? You see the one guy I'm put the arrows at?
Yeah. It's ridiculous, and it's kind of crazy to think that somebody
no
really
eyes.
took enough time to do this. And then I guess you get to the question of like, why would somebody fake all of those people actually being there? Well, you'd have to come up with some story for why this place was there. And one of the things, I didn't know, this was a new one for me, JT, was what do you think is like the tallest monument that's left over from one of these temporary fairs?
I would say that it's the Eiffel Tower.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Eiffel Tower.
The Eiffel Tower is part of a World's Fair.
Yeah.
Like, did they just go have that in a like a Lego set of steel girders? And no, not at all. This would take time for you to be able to form, those steel pieces, and for them to all be able to support each other. And then if you go to, I think it's the 1894 California Midwinter Fair, they have a mini Eiffel Tower that they made for that event.
Yeah, it seems like that the Eiffel Tower. It's actually funny. My buddy Rich was just sending me a video about the Eiffel Tower, and yeah, I mean, it makes sense kind of in the old world research that if there was some kind of way to manipulate the ether through electromagnetism, and this was some kind of massive antenna. I mean, you don't have to really try too hard to convince me that could be an antenna, because it just looks like it is, because it doesn't really seem very practical.
Almost like a Tesla tower, right? Or like right?
Yeah.
When you think of, like, when people talk about Tesla, a part of me wonders, is this just, and it's not that I don't think that like there's genius people out there. I do. But then there's this thing that makes me think maybe you were trying to reverse engineer old world stuff, because that to me could be like a perfect Tesla coil, tower where you could, transmit whatever it is that you want to transmit, right? Power, radio, anything. But to just say that you made that massive thing for a fair, the planning and the time that it would take for all the steel places to be able to provide you all that steel.
Yeah, seems like a big undertaking to me.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's your Paris World Fair right there. It's pretty ridiculous. I guess it's the thing, like in a city like Paris, it's an old city, old Roman city. They probably wouldn't have to demolish as much stuff, but Chicago, the timeline makes no sense, so that's why most everything kind of had to go.
Yeah, you'd have to get rid of all of that.
Yeah, because again, Chicago had no people in it basically in the 1840s, and so by the 1890s, you have this World Fair with millions of people showing up just to vacation there. But in Paris, yeah, I mean, nobody blinks at old world stuff because it's full of it.
Yeah, I think in Europe, I think there the story is pretty well solidified. It kind of falls apart when you go to newer places. You kind of wonder, why is there 84 cathedrals in India?
Yeah.
Yeah. Right. There's a couple places where it does kind of fall apart when you start to question it, and you're like, well, that doesn't really make sense. Like, all these people that are down there, are they really there?
Well, right. That's a good question, because this picture right here, if you guys can take a close look at this, what I see here is obviously you have some colorization to what would have been a black and white picture. But what it really looks like, it looks more like an illustration than it looks like a photograph. So the people there, are they actually there? I mean, it's not a real picture, or it's not a genuine picture.
It's not a genuine picture. Yeah.
It's not a genuine picture. It could be, you could give multiple reasons why it's not genuine. It's because they had to try to clean it up. They added color to it. But if anything, this is not any proof that anyone's there, because it's very easily to put little people there to show that there's people there. But yeah, that's way, way more common than you guys have ever noticed. That, yeah, it's kind of like that. We think of Photoshop as being a Microsoft product, right? Is that Photoshop existed when computers were out. But if you ever watch the old movies, they obviously used some kind of Photoshop. I mean, they knew how to be able to insert things into film. And so why would it would be way easier to do that into still pictures. But that's where you get like movies like Star Wars and the first Alien movie. They're really good. Actually, if you really look at some of those things, knowing they don't have computer graphics to do the work for them, they had to be creative. And so these kind of tricks are very old. And they don't even have to be that old to fool people like us, because again, if we don't know we're trying to be tricked, then how would you even know?
Yeah, it would be really difficult. And I often wonder to myself, is my conspiracy mind, is this the reason why I'm questioning, I often wonder, like, for most people, what is the thing that like got you to be this way? Questioning everything, including like,
yeah, it's kind of like the old Michael Scott talking to Toby. Why are you the way that you are?
Explain to me why you are this way, right? And like, I think it was
Did
like
somebody not love you enough?
yeah. What happened exactly? This is serious pain. So the loose change videos and Dr. Judy Wood and all these folks, right? I think that was probably the beginning of me going, there's something that's weird here. But then you start to like see the weird things in other places. And for me, the entire Christian world is, with the exception of maybe the Jehovah's Witnesses, we'll go there in just a second. I didn't know something. This is something interesting that I found. But it's like everybody, they're all waiting for Jesus to come back. And then I find out that there's large groups that are waiting for the battle of Gog and Magog to happen. But the Gog and Magog of Ezekiel 37:38. So it's interesting how everybody is deceived, but people are all deceived in a different way, right? They're all being told a different story of what's supposed to be the truth. And then you just wonder, like, how many places are you being fooled and taken advantage of? I guess that brings us into the politics thing.
Yeah. Here, hold that thought. Let's show one. I did, like I said, I was going to save this for JT's mixtape, but this fits too well. Let's show. I got this little quick video, guys, to show you guys about photo manipulation from these old photos, and I think this will fit. And then obviously I did make the thumbnail of Trump being played like a marionette, so we're gonna have to talk about that. But yeah, if you guys check this video, this is really interesting, because this goes into like kind of what we're talking about. Again, people know about the vanilla skies, or most people do. If you guys are not aware, in a lot of these old pictures, again, they're not colorized, so there's not a blue sky, but what you see in the skies, you don't see clouds, you don't see anything. They call them vanilla skies. Even there was a movie with Tom Cruise in it called Vanilla Sky. But check out this video right here. This is really interesting, because it shows maybe how they could manipulate the amount of people in these pictures.
Okay, so I want you to notice something. If you notice, when we zoom in and you look at people, you'll notice that there's a white halo around every single person that's put into this picture. Why? Because they weren't in the original pictures. If you notice, when you're looking around in these pictures, half the people don't have shadows somehow magically. Then we go over to this little horse and buggy where literally a portion of it is missing. Literally, right? And then we go looking at these people sitting in the background, right? And you notice that everybody seems to be misplaced. Nobody in these pictures was in these pictures. These are all people that have been drawn in, photoshopped, and had shit erased around them to put them into the pictures. Look at it. You don't see how there's a blatant white halo around that makes it so that you can't see the streets and shit? This is all fake fucking history.
sorry for the language there. I forgot that there was an F-bomb in there. But yeah. Other than that, yeah. What do you think, John? I mean,
honestly, I think someone tried to do the best job that they could. Right? I think somebody did a really good job, and at that time when this was done, for whatever reason it was done, it was probably really convincing. And not knowing anything else, and probably never having seen any other pictures, you would have no reason to question it. But the halos around people, portions of the carriage missing, it seems like it's really fake. And like,
I mean, I don't see any way around it. It's fake.
I mean, but then, like, the biggest question, I guess, is that's going to come up from that is, well, why? Why would somebody go through all of this trouble? And prior to this and this short season thing, I would have been probably hard pressed to explain who this unbelievable group of people were who were here for clearly a long time, who also didn't need bathrooms, and they didn't need running water, and they didn't need to eat any food. Because a lot of these places, that's one of the first things they had to add back in there is running water and bathrooms.
Yeah, I mean, I guess the only thing that makes sense to me now is that, of course, I've talked about this, and I'm not necessarily promoting the guy who made this documentary, but The Lost History of Flat Earth, the very beginning of it kind of gets into the very striking, very eerie pictures of these massive cities in Europe where they've had these incredible buildings, muddy streets, and they look completely abandoned. So it's like obviously some of those pictures were not manipulated. And it was like in that documentary, what he was trying to say was that when a photographer takes a picture like this, there is intent behind it. It's not just some random picture. It's likely that this person was trying to show this huge city, and they're trying to show the striking issue that there was no people in it. But of course, to the narrative, people always say, like, well, what does that even mean? Like, how can you justify a massive city like this where there's no people at? You can't. So therefore, eventually, people are introduced into the pictures to act like there was this unbroken chain of events in life that led to giant cities and then us later. Because they don't want to discuss it. It does seem to be that there was a reset at some point in our recent past, and that's not in the history. That's not talked about, so therefore it cannot be talked about. So therefore, the tomfoolery, the trickery, that's the photo manipulation.
Yeah, it's there's clearly something that happened. I don't have an answer for all the mud. I know that there's the whole idea of massive earthquakes and soil liquefaction. There is one verse that I've often wondered about where the dragon casts a flood out of his mouth in Revelation.
Yeah, Revelation 12.
And then the earth, basically helps and swallows up all of this water, which a bunch of water on the ground would make mud. And I know that doesn't necessarily match with the time frame of his release. Or maybe it does. I'm not sure, but it's the only thing that I can think of. God destroyed the earth once with water. Maybe Satan, in his desire to be like the Most High, would want to be able to do the same thing.
Yeah, one running theory that I know that Paul talked about, we talked about the last time him and I got together on his stream, was that in the historical record, the very first volcanic eruption ever spoken about was Mount Vesuvius in Pompeii. And so what if the sediment, what if the things that partially buried buildings and fully buried cities, what if it was volcanic activity?
Just volcanic ash.
Yeah, what if it was ash, if whatever they consider a volcano today, what if they were all going off at a certain point? And the way I see it, I mean, and I'm not sold on this idea fully, but when we watched the Gunnar Heinsohn presentation, and it was just showing that Rome was buried. And then so you have Greco-Roman things that are in America that are partially buried. So I thought, well, this seems like this had to be when Armageddon happened. This had to be when like the bowls of wrath were being poured out. You know, the topography, the geography was dramatically changed. And so what if that was closer to now than we had realized, then what it seems like to me, the phony pictures from the 1800s and the phony history from the 1800s, what it really seems to be leading me toward the conclusion is that these cities were abandoned and they were founded. And so that's why they were all looking like they're in disrepair. Because these were once great cities during a time, and then there was this event, and maybe people had to go underground, maybe people rebuilt in a different kind of way, and then they dug this stuff out later. And maybe some of these pictures are older than we even think they are. I mean, we're told that the camera was invented in 1812 or something like that. What if the pictures are way older than that, and they're telling us it's from the 1800s, just like the buildings?
Right. Maybe a lot of this technology has been around for a lot longer. Maybe even, cell phones. Who knows, right? I mean,
well, if they're lying about the buildings, it's not really much of a lie to say that the camera was invented recently. That would be obviously the smallest lie out of all the lies they've told.
Right. So let me ask you this: have you ever thought that there's a slow roll of old technology that's just coming back? Like in the beginning, you had like this insane velocity of things that were being created and patents created. Some people going, well above and beyond what everybody else was doing in terms of the number of patents. So I've had this theory of the massive patent troves that people were just creating for themselves in the 1800s. And as we move forward, is this just an older release or re-release of something that was already here that maybe somebody found and they said, hey, we can use this for something? Do you?
Yeah. I think that's my best guess about everything, is that things were more advanced sometime after the return of Jesus, after even maybe even before the return of Jesus, is that Romans were way more advanced than we were ever taught that they were. And somebody was kind of reverse engineering things afterwards. It could have been something they were holding certain things back, but that actually makes more sense to me, is that if men could do things, they would. So maybe there was such an advancement, was like what if they found a treasure trove of how to do things? And that's why things just happened, just continue to pour out, and things were made obsolete almost immediately because information overload from the past. It's funny because it even like in the modern culture, the pop culture, they often talk about how like an alien ship crashes, right? There's some spaceship crashes, and then the government keeps it secret. Meanwhile, their scientists are taking it apart and they're reverse engineering it. That's a story in countless movies, including movies like Transformers, right? They find Megatron, they store him under the Hoover Dam, and then they reverse engineer the technology that this massive Megatron, this angelic being from another planet who had fallen here, and then they finally release all this other technology that, it wasn't them who invented. It's they learned how to do something that they found.
Right. Yeah. I've I've been thinking to myself, there's they have the whole cymatic plates, and you can play a frequency, and sand will automatically, arrange itself into a certain structure. And, the guys that are always walking around with the little bag, and they seem to have a pine cone with them.
Oh yeah. Very, very bizarre. That's everywhere.
Right? They have the wings and all this other stuff. And I thought to myself, they were like these Scottish bells, and these Scottish bells look like a bag that you could carry. And
are you talking about like bagpipes?
No. Like a regular bell, like a little
Uh-huh.
like a brass bell that you could just hit. But these Scottish bells kind of looked like that bag that they're carrying in Mesopotamia, and they have this pine cone. And I'm wondering, Tesla talked about, to understand the universe, you'd have to think in sound, frequency, and vibration. And I wonder if
Oh,
maybe
okay.
there's
Let me
this,
see.
right, this special pine cone that you smash against the thing, and you're able to like manipulate matter. I don't know, but
is this what you're talking about right here? These bells that do resemble what, if you didn't know what you were looking at, it kind of almost does look like a bag. But yeah, you do see it does look like a.
that's exactly it. Those bells right there. So from the side, that could totally be what the Mesopotamian demigod is has in his hand.
Let me see if I can pull up one of those, just so I can tell the people what to look at. Let me see.
And that cymatic plate, like you can tune to a certain frequency, and the bottom of a pine cone, that exact shape, you can make it come out onto that cymatic plate. So it's interesting to me, like I wonder if some of those other things, like that we see in images, these depictions, there's a reason they have them with that bag and with that other thing there, right? Like there's something that happens with those two things.
Yeah, it's that does look more like a bag than a bell, but I do kind of see what you're saying. I guess if it was a bell, I mean it's not something I could. It's not too much of a reach, because those things did kind of look like, the Scottish bells actually do look more like bags.
Like bags from one, in this one dimension, right, view. Yeah, it looks like a bag there, and he's definitely holding the pine cone. I mean, he also has the head of a bird. Like, we're not going to talk about that. Like he has wings and the head of a bird, but the hand of a man.
Yeah, I think that, to me, when I see some of this stuff, obviously this is something that is usually kind of wrapped into like the Anunnaki. The Anunnaki look very similar than that. So typically they have, kind of, that look right there with the long beard. This gives me vibes of Babylon, ancient Sumer. And this would be, because it's kind of like what you'd see, like if they depict Nebuchadnezzar, in
or
old
like Marduk, right?
Marduk.
Right,
Marduk is the Babylonian name for Zeus. Yeah, that's I mean, it's definitely unusual. Sometimes when I think about the bird heads, I think that angels are often represented with stars. I think that the heads of these things, just like it mentions in Ezekiel 1 and Ezekiel 10, I think it's symbolic of the constellations, the zodiac.
Gotcha.
That you have like an eagle head, comes from like the eagle constellation, which I think is the Egyptian version of Scorpio. That's why they're often depicted as bulls. Obviously, then you have, was it the bulls, men? The men would be Aquarius, the water bearer, and then you have what was the other one? Eagle, bull. I'm drawing a blank. What's the other one? What's the other one that I mentioned have a certain kind of head? Lion.
Lion, yeah.
Yeah, lion head would be Leo. Leo the lion.
So it's just they're like this is like their earthly personification of them being that specific star.
Yeah, possibly. Well, I've been talking. I know every time I bring this up, people are rolling their eyes now. But I've been reading the Silmarillion in the Tolkien mythos. Okay. And it talks about how their god, Eru Ilúvatar, made lesser gods, and they sang everything into creation. And then eventually some of these lesser gods, not all of them, but a lot of them did enter the creation, and then they decided what they wanted to look like while they were in there. And when they entered the creation, they were the creation was formless. And then they were actually supposed to work toward creating the things that they sang into existence. it was really interesting. I thought, like, dang, I was like, I wonder if it kind of makes sense because you get a little bit of truth, I think, in these false religions where they have a pantheon of gods who have certain duties.
Sure.
And so it's kind of almost like it's almost like they created the world, but they didn't. And they know they didn't. But their God, their creator, used them to carry out the thing. But everything was sang into existence, and they helped in the song.
Right.
But they were never the creator. And in the Tolkien mythos, there was children of Iluvatar, and because he was the only one who was able to give things life, and so he created the elves first, and then he created the men. And I was like, dang, I wonder if that has something to do with it, but he was saying the lesser gods, they were able to take whatever form they wanted to. They could take a male form, they could take a woman's form, they could even take the form of an animal if they wanted to. And I was like, yeah, that's an interesting concept, because I think that in our minds that there's, and I realized this a couple years ago, that I feel like the church dogma says is that you have God in heaven and then there's just angels. But angels is kind of a generic term. But the Bible mentions that there's a heavenly host. And then it talks about sons of God.
Right.
We really have no idea. And then there's obviously heavenly creatures. Like, we have no idea the depth and the amount of different godlike creatures that he created that are above us, like physically in all kinds of ways. Not in like the fact that God loved them more, or that after the resurrection they're better than us, but they're clearly beings that are superior to us in multiple ways. And are they all just angels? No, they're not. We have no idea. Like, we really have no idea. And I think that there's a reason why we have no idea, because there's an allure to God's creations that are not us, that people have a tendency to worship those beings.
Well, it's like, it's clear that the from the Old Testament, people really liked worshiping things, even when God was right there and Moses was going to go talk with him. They decided that they were going to make a cow to worship, a golden calf. It's odd that there's a saying, "Holy cow," but I think that's what that means, right? But I'm sure if you were one of the watchers and you said, "I'm going to leave and I'm going to go make people worship me," you would probably want something that they could associate with you. And so it's interesting, like in the Ethiopian, church, they have 88 books, I think it is. And they have these 11 churches in Ethiopia that they're rock carved churches, and they're all connected to each other via tunnels. And they say that they did not build them, that the angels built these things. And I find it interesting, like all these places that they're incredible, like the Khaleesi temple, right? Like that rock cut temple that's there, unbelievable. But I don't know if man really made that. Could that have just been one of these fallen ones who decided, I'm going to make this massive edifice, this thing that like extends far beyond me and showing up, and this will be the thing, this will be my altar where people will like worship me. And I look at a lot of those old world, and I'm not talking like, Millennium Kingdom. No, like all the stuff that they just decided, we're just going to carve this out of a mountain, make it perfect. First time trying it. It makes me wonder about these stories and these myths about these people, and these gods that like appear out of nowhere, right?
Yeah. 100%. Yeah. I mean, we've talked about that on JT's mixtape and on this channel many times. The Indian temples are incredible. The amount of detail, even the moving parts in the stone, that's unusual to even like the Roman stuff, that's also incredible. It's really hard to understand that. And the one thing that you just mentioned is something that's really been on my heart, and it's stuff that me and Josh Truex have been talking about a lot, is that it's the idea that, and I'll give credit to Vitaly for saying this. He was saying that that a lot of things in the Bible are descriptive, they're not prescriptive, meaning that the Bible just writes down what happened. It's definitely not saying this was God's intention. So do not get it twisted. Just because men in the Bible did this, even what we would consider godly men, just because they did something doesn't mean it was condoned by God or he was blessed by God to do this. And so I've been noticing that over and over again. A real big thing that I said, of course, I said it come from the most curious places that I was noticing this is because I went on Dr. Longo, Old World Florida's channel, and I was in Florida and I was being interviewed by him, and he's a vegan and he's an evangelist vegan. So he was trying to convert me, and what he was talking about was that it was never God's intention for men to eat meat. And and I was trying to be open to it, even though I still eat meat, full disclosure, is that he was saying that when when Noah, after the ark came to rest, that he sacrificed an animal. And you can see in the text that God's upset that he did that. And he was saying that man's heart's evil right after that happened. And he was saying that now there's going to be some blood debt that needs to be repaid. And he was saying that animals are now going to be afraid of men. Yes. And I was like, that is a really interesting thing. Because I said, I did kind of, as soon as he said that, I kind of already knew what he was saying was true, because I remembered all the instances in the Bible where God was not wanting the Israelites to sacrifice to him. He gave them the Passover, but he did not want all the other sacrifices. And I used to think that in the Bible, because I just read through 2nd Chronicles, I've read through all the Kings and Chronicles this year through. And of course, I was really picking up on it, is that a lot of reasons why God would say, oh, so this king did what was right in the eyes of God, but he didn't do all of it because he still left the high places. And so in my mind, I used to always think that the Israelites were sacrificing to false gods on the high places. But if you actually see, they were sacrificing to the Lord on the high places. But God never wanted them to do that. So it was like God gave very specific instances. And I think, again, that the Passover lamb was supposed to be a symbol of Jesus. And there was only going to be one of them a year to sacrifice the Passover. I'm not saying necessarily that God only wanted them to eat meat once a year, but I was like, that's really interesting, because if you really start to notice that the Israelites do many things that God never intended them to do. And I think that's a really key to understanding the Bible. And this is a new thing for me, because I did used to think that the law from Moses came directly from God, but actually you can see hints of it, that it was never, the full law was not from God. The law that came from God was the 10 Commandments. But after that, it mentions that the law that was given to them was a stumbling block. And it was not necessarily what God ever wanted. But like what you were saying is that just in the golden calf story is probably the most clear. That it made more sense to me when I realized that they did build a golden calf not for gods of Egypt, but for God. But that's how they represented him, because they wanted to worship their God like all the other nations worship their gods.
Worship their gods.
That's why they built a temple one day too. And even when you think, you can read it plain in the text. When David says he wants to build a temple for God, God asks him tells him through Nathan the prophet, when did I ever ask for a temple? When did I ever ask for a building made by human hands? I've never lived in one before. Did I ever ask for that? But Nathan the prophet says, I'm going to do it anyways, because I know that your heart was in the right place when you wanted that for me. But in the same way that God never wanted them to have a king, he never wanted them to have a temple, they did it, and God said, fine, because I know that you guys are still confused about this, and I'm going to let you guys do it. But it always ended up going bad, because that's never what God's original intention or plan was.
Yeah, it's almost like we're pre-programmed to want to be able to have something that we can physically see, that we can, make a ritual around, or some sort of tradition around it, right? I mean, it's like we would rather come up with some story or have any story about some physical thing than just have it be there, right? It's interesting how humans, it seems like all throughout time, have just done this thing of wanting to worship something, whether they knew what the right God was that they should be worshiping. It just seems like it's this thing where like we want to do that. I don't know.
No, yeah, I agree with you. What you're saying is, I think it's because we are very imperfect beings at this point, and it's very hard for us to think past the flesh. So the reason why the Israelites wanted to do these things is because that's what they saw. So if this is how you worship a god, then therefore we're going to worship our God this way too, because it seems pretty awesome. You throw these great parties, and you do all the things. You eat meat, you get drunk, and a lot of times it ends with lots of fertility things. So
Sure.
that's the way they wanted to worship their God. But in actuality, it's like God wants you to lead you with your heart. He wants to speak directly to you, and he wants you to lead you through your conscience and through the Holy Spirit directing you. And that's more difficult to do it like that. And it's really, again, it's really hard to say, this is what I know, but God's trying to teach you a better way, in the way that he wants it to be done. And you do kind of have to quiet down all the outside influences in order to let God do that for you. But no, I think I really do feel like that the physical world makes it harder for us to hear God sometimes. But it's not because he's not speaking to us, but it's because we are distracted. And yeah, that's the devil's greatest tool, is the fact that he kind of runs this physical place. And so he gets you to desire the physical things, and he tries to subtly manipulate you in ways that you don't even know it's happening.
Yeah, it's interesting. You and I were talking before, and I said, the father of lies is also the father of distraction.
Yeah.
And how, anytime that I wanted to make some content, right, some stuff about God and the short season, there would be all these things that would come up that would distract me, right, out of nowhere. I mean, it was like a constant thing that would happen. And then I guess, like, if you zoom out a little bit, it's almost like you start to see that the father of distraction has his claws in everywhere. And you would be hard pressed to be able to go a day without constantly being distracted by something. And it's usually this mobile device that we're all walking around with, that we can't get away from it, right? But somebody saw that this was going to be the new way of getting you constantly hooked and your attention constantly being given over to things that you don't pay for, but you are the product of them, right? Like you don't pay for Facebook, you don't pay for Instagram, but you are the product.
Yeah.
For that entire thing.
For sure.
And the economy, the currency is how much time can they get you to be distracted from not being able to do important things like, I don't know, is God real, right? Maybe I should read the Bible, right? And maybe I can just get hooked into this constant dopamine cycle of like scrolling through videos and feeling good. And, people wonder why like their lives are so, not that it's meaningless, but like people are very, very easily manipulated, where they don't realize how easily, we talked about the theater of life. And it seems like these are the tools that help out the overall theater. Like if you didn't have these tools to be able to shape and mold the conversation, I wouldn't be able to get you upset. I wouldn't be able to garner an emotion out of you. Right. But it seems like that's how the whole world is really structured, is for them to be able to get a response or create the situation that gets a response where they get to do something else. And the more you disconnect from it and you don't care about it, I'm not saying politics isn't important. Obviously, it's going to affect my life in some way. But I feel like it's almost reality TV in some sort, where it's just gonna get you upset. And I see it as another like ordo ab chaos, right? Order out of chaos.
Yeah.
Scottish Rite. We create the order we want by putting this chaos out there, right? And so I mean, I don't know if we're ready to shift gears to go to the political.
Well, if you want to talk about this, because obviously I was thinking this was a good segue to talk about that the war in the Middle East, which I guess is supposedly done now, and we should never worry about it. And all of us who said that, hey, this is kind of scary, this could lead us into World War III, and we all don't want that, right? And so a lot of people who, like me, who were trying to say, hey, everyone chill out. This seems a little bit hasty to get involved in another boondoggle in the Middle East. And now people are saying, oh, well, it's fine. Don't worry. It's all done. Trump won. Trump owned Iran, and now we're good. And there's a new golden age of peace coming. But for me, I'm like, is this really done? I mean, what is this? Is this something? Is this another massive distraction? Is this more Masonic theater? Is this something to distract us, or is there something more afoot? What say you, John?
Yeah. So, look, there was a point in time that I was a very political person. I really was. You know, I served in the military. I was in the National Guard for 12 years. I was deployed to Iraq and to Guantanamo Bay, Cuba, and I was really, really all about politics. And then I kind of like had this shift where I think it was Iraq that kind of like opened my eyes that like the military industrial complex is by far more powerful than any of the people that you see on TV who claim to be the ones who can do things. Like that money and that machine will put car dealerships in the middle of a war zone. They will build Starbucks and green beans and Cinnabons and anything you could think of. When you would think of a war zone, Iraq and Afghanistan, that's not what you would think. And there's probably more contractors that were there than there were U.S. service people. So sometimes direct experience gives you this purview where you're like, you know what? I don't know if I believe all these things. And part of me thinks this is maybe just another military industrial complex grab where they're just going to be able to make a bunch of money off of some conflict, even though bad things happen to people. But it could also just be these are the characters that are on the stage. These are the people that are the elected leaders, right? The folks who are going to run the show. And in some way, it does feel like I'm watching a reality TV show of presidents.
Yeah,
and it might sound really horrible, and I'm not trying to be like. I have feelings for the people who are there who are being hurt by all of these things, but the people who are in power don't care about that.
Oh yeah.
It doesn't mean that the situation isn't any less, bad, but it very much feels to me like it's scripted.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think for a lot of it, it's just again from my generation, being early 20s when 9/11 happened, and then all the rush to war in Afghanistan and then Iraq. Even I remember I guess I was in middle school when the first Desert Storm happened. And I remember being like very traumatized, the idea that we're going to war because, of course, I remember my dad always watching like World War II movies and hearing about Vietnam and stuff. And I just thought, oh man, this sounds really bad. And then Desert Storm was over just before it even began. It was like so fast. And then so when they wanted us to go to war because Iraq had weapons of mass destruction in 2003, I thought, or 2005, I guess, yeah, it was 2003, I think.
2003.
Yeah.
2003.
And so I was just like, well, it'll be over real quick because it took no time to take care of the Iraqis the last time. So this will be over before it began. And then realizing, no, it's not like that. And it does feel a lot like that, where that once they get started, there'll be no rush to get it over with. I mean, I'm hoping, that, I mean, I guess to me, the way it seems like is that after 2020 and all the funny business that went on with that election and all the stuff leading up to that, I said, I'm done. I'm never voting again. And this is before I really kind of woke up spiritually, but I kind of woke up like, I kind of was black-pilled then. And I said, there's no point to any of this. I'm never doing this again. And I haven't since. And like I said, I still reserve the right if I ever feel like led to do it again, but I have not done it. And I did not vote for Trump in this last election. It kind of reminds me of being a Redskins fan. There was a time where I was so invested in this pro sports team that really, I could do nothing about whether they won or lost. Of course, if I went to the game, I guess I could yell louder and maybe that might help them. But ultimately, I felt so just wrecked, like emotionally, when they lost, and they often lost because they were not very good. That kind of reminds me of like that was kind of the same journey I went with politics. That what can I really do about it? I mean, I guess now I do have God has given me a platform to potentially, I don't know how much, to sway public opinion in some kind of way. That's more than I ever had before. But yeah, I mean, when you put all your investment and your emotional hope into this man to fix things, I mean, just look at it. I mean, I don't care whether you guys voted for Trump. I'm not throwing shade at you, but you have to be honest with yourself. I can see it where you say, "Oh, well, he was going to be better than Kamala." Fine, no argument there. At the same time, this does remind me of when I voted for George W. Bush. One of the very first elections I could vote in is that he won, and he was Christian, and he was going to do all this stuff. He was going to be so much better than Bill Clinton, and then he made the government bigger. He got us involved in 2 wars. He was a liar. He was not really a Christian. He's a fake Christian. And after that, I was just like, yeah, this is a scam. And then you have this guy, Obama, come in who claims to be a dove. He's going to get us out of all these wars. Well, he does. He gets us out of Iraq. And then he starts other wars in the Middle East. And I was like, we've been played. It is. It's 2 wings of the same bird. So when you have Trump coming in there talking about putting America first, then he's clearly, yeah. So I made the thumbnail of him being played like a marionette. That he was even out there defending Bibi Netanyahu against, I guess, his corruption charges today on Twitter, or that was last night. I'm like, this is embarrassing. It's like he's supposed to be this big alpha guy, but you can very clearly tell that he comes out there being very upset when Israel and Iran violated the ceasefire, more upset with Israel, I think, because he looked like an idiot, because he's supposed to be the one who's kind of in charge. But when his own ally, our best ally, our greatest ally in the Middle East, just did whatever they wanted to, despite what he said, he looked like a moron. And then he comes out and defends that guy like the same day. It's so embarrassing, so pathetic.
Yeah, I like you, I was very invested in things, and especially politics. But I guess the biggest thing that did it for me was realizing that there are groups of people who hold very high political positions who all happen to enjoy the same fraternity. Now, it seems, and I do remember, when I came across the understanding of like a lot of people who are in business who have done really, really well, they are also part of that same fraternity of Freemasonry. And on the political side, right, red or blue, there's a lot of folks that are in that same fraternity. And so I've often thought, like, if you wanted to be able to control people, probably the best way of doing that is for you to have representatives on both sides. And you can just play that card back and forth all day long. And the masses are none the wiser, right? They don't really understand what's happening. And I guess, like, when I think about the whole short season thing, I often think to myself, like, if this is really the way it is, and, the devil was loosed and he was free for a real long season of deception, how would he even make a determination of who was going to be in charge and who was going to carry out his bidding? Well, maybe during that 1,000 years, those real secret societies, they really were secret because you couldn't have any other religion outside of Christ. And, you can go on to Google and type in Duncan's ritual and monitor, and it'll show you everything about every single degree that these people go through, from the 1st degree all the way up to the 32nd degree. So it's not a secret, right? Like, it's all there. And maybe these people were the ones who were venerating him while he was locked up. And these were the ones who were given over the keys to everything. Because I find it interesting, inside of a Freemason lodge, when they're going to do any of their ritual, the main guy, he is wearing a top hat, and this is symbolic of King Solomon. And so all those old pictures from the 1800s, there's always a guy doing that, the sign of the master of the second veil, hiding their hand in a picture somewhere.
Yeah, I don't know.
Right?
Can you see that in the picture I pulled up?
Yeah. So it's like, that is from Duncan's Ritual and Monitor, right under Trump, where they're, hiding one hand, pledging of allegiance, over your heart. This is another Masonic thing. These are all part of the, if you read these books, if you read like Albert Mackey and his Encyclopedia of Freemasonry, these people are all part of a theater that each person, when they're going through each degree, they're reenacting some sort of theater for all these people. And so it's made me think of, when they talk about the world stage, and maybe what you're seeing, you might not like what it looks like, but maybe they're just letting you all know that's what this is. And if you don't know, well, you're going to be fooled by it, right? But if you realized what they were doing and the symbols that they were showing you, maybe you wouldn't have so much of an attachment to it emotionally. Maybe you wouldn't let it charge you so much, because you'd realize there's two sides to the coin, and they both come from the same bank, the same minting place, right? It's that's how I look at this now. Like I look at everything as like just another way to distract me or to get a rise out of me emotionally.
Yeah, no question about it. Of course, interesting. I'll plug the new episode of JT's Mixtape. Once again, it's on Patreon right now. So if you guys are interested in watching that, please continue to watch this stream. But you guys, it's available afterwards. But we talked a lot about that. And if you guys are not aware, and this was really interesting, was in the new Maverick movie. I guess it's not new. It's like 3 years old. The Top Gun 2 Maverick.
Yes.
There was some predictive programming came out that almost lined up exactly with what happened with the bombing raids to take out the nukes and the centrifuges in Iran in that movie. And it's like, yeah, that's like Kabbalistic magic. So sometimes people like talk about predictive programming. It's like there's levels of it. I think this is the magic. This is the theater. This is trying to manufacture consent. That this is not weird. This is not unusual for us to go bomb places. So they put this into the culture, into the movies. And so when it happens in real life, people are less likely to push back. I actually do think that I'm not completely black-pilled by politics, because guys like Trump, I don't trust him one bit. Again, I think he is a puppet for bigger fish. Somebody else is puppeteering him. But at the same time, I do think that what I have seen, and this is just, I mean, I could be wrong about this, but what I've seen over the past few years, it does seem like certain politicians can be influenced by the public opinion. That what if they're not getting full consent? If we're apathetic, then they will do whatever they want to, and they'll try to get it rammed through. But I do feel like that if we do have any power, is the fact to say, no, I'm not fooled by this. I want you to do this. You are supposed to work for me. I know that's what they say, and I'm not naive either. But I do think that when we're loud and we do voice our opinions here, that, yeah, I think maybe there's a spiritual component of that. Like, the people are not fooled by this. And eventually we're not going to be able to do it. And maybe they will still, but I have started to notice that these people, the more we continue to wake people up, like people like Ted Cruz, again, showing the hidden hand on that debate, and then you seeing how he performed in front of Tucker Carlson, where when you actually do expose it, the emperor has no clothes. It's like the Wizard of Oz.
Sure.
You pull back the curtain, you see there's a guy back there. This is not magic. This is some guy trying to convince you, trying to change your consciousness through Kabbalistic magic. But when you're not, but if you don't want to be fooled, you won't be. Because that's the thing. It's like, I'm sure if Ted Cruz and I took an IQ test, he's probably way smarter than me. Like, like you could probably value that in some kind of way. But I would have sounded way smarter talking to Tucker Carlson than he was, because I wouldn't be lying.
Right.
You know, very smart men can look very stupid when they're telling very obvious lies. And I think that's what he was doing. And that's what you see lots of politicians who are not stupid,
No.
but they're bad liars. Or people are just not, they're not, when you want to be convinced, when you want to be lied to, they're pretty good. But when you don't want to be lied to, you realize there's a man behind the curtain, and it's a liar. And so I do feel like that maybe that's where we can affect the things going on in our world, to not be deceived by these charlatans, and to know what's true and to know what's right, and to ultimately, the thing that is most offensive, I think, to me, is that you have the evangelical church all on board with war and the agenda to support genocide in the Middle East, as long as Israel's doing it. But if it's not Israel doing it, then it's bad. If it's Muslims doing it, it's horrible. But
Right.
if it's God's chosen people, who they say God's chosen people are, then it's all fine. I feel like that's the thing that's most troubling, because as somebody who is awake to that deception, that's where wrong doctrine really becomes really dangerous. I mean, it's dangerous when your doctrine's wrong, where it could put your own soul in peril. I mean, that's about as dangerous as it gets. But it's probably more dangerous when your doctrine also leads to a genocide that you feel like you can justify, which I would say would also put your soul in jeopardy as well.
Jeopardy.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, no, I do. It's I often wonder, with the whole short season stuff, how would things go politically if people realized that the political state of Israel may not be the ones that we're talking about in the Bible, and those things already happened a long time ago. And a third temple, it's not in there, right? Jesus is the third temple. In the book of Hagai, when Joshua and Zerubbabel are walking around and they're looking at this current second temple, he asks them, "Who among you here remembers the first temple in all of its glory, and how do you see it now?" So that's the Temple of Solomon. There is no third one, folks. So if people really just read a little bit and realized that maybe the short season thing was correct and that Jesus kept his promise, you wouldn't have all of this stuff attached to Israel, because nobody would stand for it. There wouldn't be a reason for it, because these, right? We are neither, there's neither Jew nor Gentile, slave nor free, man nor woman. We're all one in Christ Jesus. So I don't know how you can misconstrue those two things and support, a lot of this, I think, comes down to dispensationalism. Because if people realized that this is not talking about something in the future, we would eliminate a lot of these problems that we have. I mean, I'm not trying to get you any more strikes, but I think you know what I'm saying.
No, yeah, 100%. Oh yeah, I've been talking about this. I talked about this last week. I should read this verse. I thought this was an omission last week, because I did take apart Ted Cruz's argument about what he thinks the justification is for supporting Israel no matter what. And the one verse I didn't read, and somebody, forgive me because I don't remember exactly who called me out on that this is the one I probably should have mentioned. If you go to Galatians 3, which obviously we quoted Galatians 3:28, but if you go to Galatians 3, starting with verse 6, and so ultimately Cruz quotes, even though he didn't know he's quoting from it, he quotes Genesis 12:3, which is a promise to Abraham. So I'm going to bless thee who blesses thee, and I'm going to curse thee who curses thee. But before he says that, he's making a promise. He's making a covenant with Abraham. So the nation that comes from Abraham's seed is, well, we know it's Israel eventually, right? But it's, again, Israel did not exist when God made that promise. So, but here's what Paul says. So this is Paul's interpretation who is the apostle to the Gentiles in the New Testament. So Galatians 3:6. Even as Abraham believed God, it was accounted to him for righteousness. Know ye therefore that they which are of faith, the same are children of Abraham. And the scripture, foreseeing that God would justify the heathen through faith, preached before the gospel unto Abraham, saying that these shall all nations be blessed. So then, when they which be of faith are blessed with faithful Abraham. That is actually probably the most clear way you can describe what the promise was about, was that people of faith were children of Abraham. And if you were in faith, you'd be blessed, just like it said Abraham was blessed. So, yeah, the idea that it's outside of that currently, and a lot of people made the great point saying that if this is your whole theology is based on this modern nation of Israel, and we need to support this. So what about when Israel was destroyed in 70 AD and all the time after that? So what would people have been doing to support Israel or Abraham? Of course, then it was a very clear doctrine was, oh, well, it's a spiritual concept now because it's all based on faith. So the people who are in Christ are Abraham's seed, as it says in Galatians 3:28. So therefore, we bless other Christians, not a secular nation, not one who's trying to commit genocide on its neighbors and regime change and all the boondoggle that goes with any kind of conflicts in the Middle East. It's absurd to put in any other terms, but then in political terms, you have people like Trump, who would fall directly in the same category as George W. Bush, Barack Obama, Bill Clinton, all the other presidents came before him. We cannot let them get weapons of mass destruction. So in order to them not let them get weapons of mass destruction, we must do preemptive things, which include destabilizing the region by changing regimes when it's never really worked before, ever. But let's just give it another try. You know, the definition of insanity.
Not to mention the fact that we don't even know if those things are real. So I'm not saying that Hiroshima and Nagasaki didn't happen, right? I'm not saying that. But based on what we're told, no one should be living there right now.
Yeah, well, you make a good case. Well, I don't even know if we can talk about it. I'm not even sure. No, I will say what you said is, put it this way, is that what you're saying is a valid point. Is we don't even, the point is, even if they are real, we don't even know if they have them. We don't know who really has them. We've never really seen them obviously been used on anyone in the modern era, which we are told that there's a deterrent based on other countries having them. Even we're talking about rogue states like North Korea, who has not used them, despite all the fact that all the worry that the media's tried to instill on us behind that Kim Jong-il or Kim Jong-un, his son, that they're just going to just use it on some random country. They haven't yet, but maybe that's that's part of the Kabbalistic magic. And trying to make us afraid.
Keep the fear can down the road.
Yeah, more fear.
You could keep people in a perpetual state of fear. You can control them, tell them whatever policy you want to make, and basically erode their freedoms in the process. You become like God in a sense, I guess. That maybe that's how they feel, right?
Well, I think that again, that's part of the magic is that it's very easy. Or we're the most malleable when we're angry or afraid. Those two emotions, I think, are the easiest way to manipulate people. And I think fear being the most, probably that kind of MK Ultra mindset of like that if you can make somebody afraid, and if they're afraid, they'll give up all kinds of consent to you to do whatever comes next. People make irrational decisions when they're afraid. So that's the best way for them to trick you, to lie to you, and get you to believe it. And again, and if you were afraid and you sinned during that time, I think it's still a sin because because it shows your lack of faith in God when you do that.
Yeah, be not afraid, right? And during the the cough that everybody had, where they couldn't work and they couldn't go places, I think a lot of people were willing to do almost anything to be able to have life go back to normal. And again, I don't think that there's a large group of people now who are going, hey, we all think that cough thing that happened was real, and we really trust the science over here, right? It's just I feel like there's like these periods where things happen that they're giving you the opportunity to wake up, but it's like, how much faith, I guess, do you have that you can kind of trust yourself and trust that God's not going to lead you into the wrong direction here if you're asking for some help. But I don't know. I often, it's hard for me sometimes when I talk to people and they're very, very polarized by politics or whatever else. I guess seeing things through the short season lens, I often think that a lot of people are part of central casting, and this is like just a big theater that I'm watching, and I'm a part of somehow.
Yeah, I get you. I mean, I guess that's the thing. I think that's why certain people do start to believe in that whole idea of like a simulation, like that. Just none of this seems real when you see how manufactured it all is. But I mean, from our perspective, it's like, yeah, we do live on our phones now, and so it's really hard. I mean, so you can really think that they really have access to manipulate us in all kinds of ways, and it does feel like that. I guess if you let it is all fake. But if you kind of concentrate on what God's put in front of you, no, there's a very real existence that we have here. But yeah, like the distractions, it does seem manufactured. It's like the Truman Show. With that being said, John, would you like to take some questions with me? Because we've been doing Q&A every Thursday night. We don't have a ton of questions tonight. Yeah, if you want to, you can help me carry the load. You want to read some questions with me?
Absolutely.
Okay, let's go to the screen share. And so we got, let's see, move this over a little bit. Okay, so we got the questions here. We're going to start with Renegade Seed. Looks like he's got no question, but of course he's going to flatter me, so that's fine too. No question, just wanted to say thank you, JT, for everything you do. Well, you're very welcome, Renegade Seed. Okay, so we got second question, or not, first question. Lady Cal VRT 22. Hey, JT, I really enjoyed your interview with Bible Geeks and Freaks. Much appreciated how you explained the difference between various Bible translations, and also you addressed the accusation that the Bible is full of misinterpretations because of different translations. Okay, is there going to be a question in here? Okay, let's get down to the question. My question tonight, can you elaborate what or who exactly the Ashkenazi Jews are? Not sure the exact spelling. I'm just trying to understand how they relate to current Jews living in Israel and Zionism. Also, the same note, I keep hearing many of my friends and family say Zionism is simply the Jewish people having a right to a land they can call their own. And as Americans, there's nothing wrong with supporting that. I'd love to hear your response to that oversimplified definition of Zionism. Keep up the great work, and God bless. Well, sure. Let me try to put this as tactfully as possible, because again, this is a this is a delicate subject. I've talked about this subject before, and of course, when we talk about Israel now, there's no anti-Semitic things. Again, Semitic comes from Shem. So Shem's line, Shem being one of three sons that came from Noah who were on the ark, and all nations were begot of those three sons. But what's pretty interesting when you think about it, so there are people who call themselves not just Jews, but Ashkenazi Jews. Now, knowing a little bit of biblical history, this is really interesting. If you guys, lots of people get really bored with the genealogies. But I'm gonna actually, I'll just pull this up on my screen share. Let's go over to the book of Chronicles. Go First Chronicles. And so, yeah, again, people get bored with the genealogies. But let's just start reading through some of them. Okay, starting with Chronicles 1, Adam, Shed. I don't want to read in the KJV because it's funny because they do change the names a little bit, and that's kind of annoying because we don't talk like that. Okay. It says Adam, Seth, Enosh, Canaan, Mahalalel, Jared, Enoch, Methuselah, Lamech, Noah, Shem, Ham, and Japheth. Okay. And it says the sons of Japheth were Gomer, Magog. Again, we talk about Gog, Magog. You got Magog, Madai, Javan, Tubal, Meshach, Tiras. The sons of Gomer were Ashkenaz. Okay, we'll just end there, but let's go backwards again. The sons of Japheth. Okay, so that's kind of interesting when you think about that. If you don't like the policies of the nation of Israel, you're often accused of being anti-Semitic, which would be more likely, what would be more accurate would say you're anti-Shemitic. Now, I've often made this point. There's only 3 sons of Noah. There's a lot of descendants of Shem. So to say you don't like what's happening in 2025, the year they say it is, Anno Domini, the year of our Lord, saying you're anti-Shem because you don't like what's going on in Israel right now. You don't support wars in the Middle East that they want. That's really weird. But what's even more ironic is that, like I said, there's three sons of Noah: Shem, Ham, and Japheth. Japheth's sons were Gomer, and then Gomer's son was Ashkenaz. So Ashkenaz is the grandson of Japheth, who he's not related to other than him being like a second cousin or whatever, or third cousin, wherever you say that is. Japheth is Shem's brother. Ashkenaz is not in the line of Shem. So if you say you're related to Ashkenaz, then you're not related to Shem. So therefore, if you don't like people in Japheth's line, you're not anti-Semitic by definition. So that's a little bit of irony, but the rest of it is like that. Yeah, so I'll answer this question. I'll let John, maybe if he wants to elaborate on this. Be careful, John, how you answer this question. That, people saying that Zionism is simply Jewish people wanting the right to a land they can call their own. Sure, that is a right that a lot of people can reserve. The difference between what Zionism is and what, like you could say, a lot of people would say these colonialist Americans took over the natives' land in the place we live right now. And that's a problem for certain people. But that's kind of how it's always been. Through conquest, through military action, whatever, people deposed other peoples in their lands. Even in the story, the original story, that God sent the Israelites in to take a land. But through God's help and their own strength, faith in the Lord, they took that land. That's not what happened in the 1940s. That the Western countries deposed people, and then they took it over afterwards. And the only reason they likely still have that land is because we back them. So that's different. So we kicked certain people out of that land and gave it to them. And so it's kind of like that. Does Israel have the right to remain a nation? No, I don't think that they do. I don't think that anybody really does. Do people have the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness? I believe those are God-given rights, but I don't think you don't have the right to remain a nation unless you can do it yourself. I mean, does America and Great Britain and France and other countries that back Israel, do we have to defend them if they're being provocative to their neighbors and wanting to keep this land? If they can't get along with their neighbors, do we have to continue to support that? I mean, that's kind of like what do you guys think? I mean, I'm saying I don't know that we necessarily have to, but we do. So I would say that yes, they have the right to defend themselves, but at the same time, their neighbors do too, and they don't have to accept that they're legitimate because they do some illegal stuff, and maybe their neighbors do too. So, what do you think, John?
I think in the book of Matthew and the parable of the vineyard, in the Tanakh, the Torah, which is the Old Testament, you have to have a Messiah, right? There's a Messiah that's going to come. He's going to be a wonderful counselor. He's going to be wise beyond his years. He's, he'll be a son of David. And when I read the parable of the vineyard, he talks about these people not doing the right thing, and that the last person that he's going to send to get these people to do the right thing are going to be his son, and they're going to kill him so that they can take his inheritance. Now, if you believe in the Bible, well, the son that they're going to kill is Jesus, and he's going to take their kingdom away from them. So based on that, how would they then automatically be given free reign for them to just go do whatever it is that they want to include killing their neighbors? If Jesus, or, in Matthew, it's going to be taken away. I mean, it's pretty clear who they're talking about. So I don't know. I'm just going to go off of what Scripture says there, right? And if Scripture says that this is what's supposed to happen, we know that's what happened. Well, then what basis do you have now to be able to say that you can do whatever you want?
Right. Yeah. Again, like what it says in Galatians 6-9, or 3:6-9, it says that the children of faith are Abraham's seed and they're heirs to the promise. So the people who rejected Jesus are not heirs to that promise because they rejected it. They didn't believe. So through lack of faith, that they are out of the promise. And I brought that up, and I know a lot of people talk about that. They try to smear people like me with that term replacement theology. But I don't know how to interpret both the parables of the wedding feast and also the parable of the wicked tenants. When Jesus said, yes, the kingdom is going to be taken from you and it's going to be given to someone else, given to another nation who's going to produce fruit. Like, what are you supposed to do with that? And I think that again, I mentioned over and over again, there's a fundamental misunderstanding of why there's trouble for Jacob, why there's issues, why there are these other nations that God is allowing to come in to destroy them, because that's God's judgment on them. So I think that's interesting in the way that how the dispensationalists will view this, because don't you find it funny how the way that they interpret these end time scriptures where, oh, well, nobody has to worry about Israel because God's going to protect them during this time. Who sends the nations to destroy them? It's God who does that. I think that's what the one thing that people don't understand. Do you think that these nations are coming against Israel just on their own volition? It's like God sent Nebuchadnezzar. God sent the Romans. So if God sent those nations to judge Israel, judge Judah, judge Jerusalem, then that was God's divine judgment to send these other nations. So yes, he saves a remnant. And then again, this is not just a bloodline thing. So this is that when Paul says that he quotes Isaiah, there's a remnant. He quotes Elijah when Elijah was told by God that there's still a remnant left. You think you're the only one, you're not. So it's not that God tossed off all the old Israelites. He did the ones who didn't believe, in the same way that the people in the wilderness on the Exodus died in their unbelief and they were not allowed to come into the promised land. I think it's exactly the same. Think about that story, that you had all these unbelieving people, these hard-headed people, faithless complainers. They were not allowed to go into the promised land. There was only 2 from that whole generation that got in, plus the next generation after them were allowed to come in. I think it's the same way. I think it was the same way when 70 AD happened. So the idea that they're going to come back now and the dispensationalists think that they're going to rebuild the temple, then what happens after that? Did God just immediately starts protecting them? The faithless people, the people who don't believe? Or you would have to expect it at the very least that Jerusalem's going to get destroyed again in order to find out who is going to put their faith in God in the very last time. I mean, what else would you expect? I mean, I think that they think that it's like they do think that you can have your cake and eat it too. All these people are going to come to faith in Jesus, but how does that happen unless they're put into major distress? Like the burning down, the razing of Jerusalem one more time.
Yeah, and I know I brought it up before about the book of Hagai, but Hagai 2 is where this starts, where they are speaking to Zerubbabel and Joshua as they are building this second house. So we know that the second house was destroyed, and starting at verse 6, in a little while I will once more shake the heavens and the earth and the sea and the dry land. I will shake all nations, and what is desired by all nations will come, and I will fill this house with glory. The silver is mine, the gold is mine, declares the Lord. The glory of the present house is greater than the glory of the former house. So the former house is the temple of Solomon's temple. They are building this second temple. This second temple is destroyed, and Jesus becomes the third temple. So with all that, how are we now waiting for a third one to be physically built there? That doesn't make any sense.
No, it makes zero sense. Again,
it makes zero sense. So,
yeah, go ahead. Finish what you're saying.
Yeah, no.
No, I was just going to say that as I mentioned from the very beginning, that when David talks about wanting to build God a temple, he did not want the first one. So why would he need another one? And again, I already go back and I said I think this is more illustrative of like what God really wants, is the idea that he didn't even want a first temple. He did not want them to sacrifice to him all the time. He did not want to be worshipped like the other nations. So in order for God's plan to be, his prophecies to be fulfilled in the dispensationalist mind, is he wants his people to go do things that he does not want only for a temple to be defiled. But it would be defiling the temple of the Holy Spirit, us, and Christ himself, by building another temple, killing animals again, and then only for an Antichrist to go in there. It's again, and then just so he can destroy Jerusalem one more time.
That doesn't make any sense.
It seems, I don't know. It doesn't seem like it makes a lick of sense, probably because it doesn't.
Right.
All right, let's go to the next question. Let's see what we got over here. Oh, muff over here. Okay, so we got a question here. It says, "Stay curious, AXP. Through your research, do you know if there's archaeological evidence of the second temple that was destroyed in 70 AD or the current Temple Mount in Jerusalem? If so, wouldn't that evidence confirm the true location of Jerusalem, not elsewhere like some speculate? Thank you for all your hard work, JT. God bless." I would say that what I believe is that Jesus said every stone in that temple was thrown down. Also, it mentions in the works of Josephus, which again is not inspired scripture, but I think it's pretty reliable, that it said that when the Romans destroyed the temple and burned it down, that the gold melted down into the foundations of the temple, and the Romans dug up the foundations to get the gold out. So fulfilling the prophecy of Jesus that not one stone will be left upon another. So when they showed the Wailing Wall, would they say that that's like remnants of the old temple? No, I don't think that that's the old temple. I'm not sure what that is. I'm not necessarily doubting that the location of where maybe the Dome of the Rock could have been where the temple was built. I've always said that I'm open to the idea that some of the biblical locations could be elsewhere. But from my perspective, I think it's probably where they say it is. I think that everything is different than it used to be after all the judgments that came upon that place. But yes, I don't think that there's a lot of evidence. I mean, what we do have is histories of, which could be very unreliable, is the Knights Templar went in Mount Moriah. Mount Moriah is where the Temple Mount is. They went under the ground and supposedly found scrolls and things from past temple remnants, maybe from the times of Josiah and the former kings of Judah. Is that true? I mean, there's no telling. There's no telling, but no, I don't think that there's any super concrete evidence, because I think again that if Jesus said everything was going to be destroyed from the second temple, it was. And if they say anything is left over from it, the people who would say that there's things left over, I don't believe them. I think they're liars. What do you think? What do you think, John?
It's interesting. I think I've looked this up before, but I had to just double check to make sure. But Fort Antonia, a Roman fortress built by Herod the Great, that is what Google says is the Wailing Wall.
Oh, interesting. Okay, so even Google's saying that the Wailing Wall is not actually remnants of the temple.
It's the retaining wall of Fort Antonio or Antonia.
Yeah, that's good. Okay, there you go. Good call. Okay, we got Truth Unfiltered over here. Rev, I believe when you die, your consciousness never fades away, and when we enter the spirit realm, we as physical as we are when we are alive in the flesh. What do you think happens when we die, and what are your thoughts on outer body experiences? You know, it's interesting. I was just asked that question, and I feel like that I don't know. I think that I just don't know, because even before I believe we're in the short season, I was under the interpretation that if Jesus had not come back yet, then nobody is in heaven yet until the last day when Jesus raises people up in the resurrection. Even the church often always says that absent of the body is to be present with the Lord. I think that scripture, I don't think it really means what they use it to mean. I feel like to be in New Jerusalem, I feel like you have to be resurrected. And I know that if we believe we're in the short season, we know that there was one resurrection, which would be of the saints and the people who are reigning and ruling with Jesus in New Jerusalem. What happens when we die? Well, I mean, you can see very clearly that if you've ever had a loved one pass and you've been to a funeral where there's an open casket, well, their body has not been reanimated. They're not resurrected right away. So where does their soul, their spirit go? I don't know. I mean, I think maybe it does go into another waiting period. What do you think, John? I mean, that's again, I really don't know. I don't know. I don't know if it's until the second resurrection is that we get to partake in New Jerusalem in heaven.
Yeah, I don't know. I've thought about this. Maybe there is just another waiting area that you get to go to. I was always under the impression that everybody has to stand in front of the white throne of judgment, no matter what. So I don't know. Maybe you just go into a sleep and you don't really know what's happening. You know, I don't remember the verse off the top of my head, but I know that, you know, there will be things that'll happen, you know, and no one will be able to remember the former things. So, you know, maybe when you die, you just, you know, you're kind of in sleep and you're waiting for that big white throne moment. It is interesting though, the comment about like outer body experiences. And, you know, these shamans where they basically are trying to get in contact with entities from the other side. And it's like they exchange their body, their physical body, for information or knowledge or whatever, what have you. So it would seem that, like, you know, it's supported in other places that you can go somewhere else. You know, you can astral project yourself to somewhere else. And, you know, maybe there is something more to the fact that, like, you know, you can go somewhere while you're still alive, right? And the body is more a vessel for the soul. Because it is interesting in all those other cultures, in these ancestor, you know, in the, you know, ancestor spirit worship cultures, they're dressing up like something, or they're taking some sort of something, or they're getting into a meditative state so that they can kind of be taken over. So yeah, maybe it is possible that you can go somewhere else. I don't know. I'm not trying to find out.
Yeah. Well, so I just quote this verse. So this is what people often quote when, especially at funerals, when they say as Christians, they say, okay, so you go to 2 Corinthians 5, starting with verse 6. So we are always confident knowing that for while we are at home in the body, we are absent from the Lord, for we walk by faith, not by sight. We are confident, yes, well pleased rather to be absent from the body and to be present with the Lord. Therefore, we make it our aim, whether present or absent, to be well pleasing to him. For we must all appear before the judgment seat of Christ, that each one may receive the things done in body according to what he has done, whether good or bad. Knowing therefore the terror of the Lord, we persuade men, but we are well known to God, and also trust we are known to your consciousness, your consciences. So I think that's quite a bit different than the way people quote it, to say, well, we know that we'll be present with the Lord if we're doing. I think that there's some room there. I don't know that it's clear, because he was basically saying, like, you're going to have to appear before God's throne. So when is the white throne? After the second resurrection. So when's the second resurrection? I don't know. Has it happened? I don't think it's happened yet. So I would say that, yeah, I don't know. I mean, we do know that Christ took the keys of hell and death. Death wears your sting. But does that mean that it's completely empty down in the underworld now? I've often said that it could be something similar, that just when you go under anesthesia, you go into surgery, maybe for us, if we went down and we slept, we would not recognize how much time had passed before we are awake and present before the Lord. Good question. Very good question. Hard to answer. Okay, let's say Patrick Hansnook 3540. What is your take on the Crusades? Were they Jesus ruling with the iron rod? Are they misrepresented in how they are depicted in order to demonize them? Or were they something entirely different due to the timeline, tomfoolery? God bless. Excellent question. I think that Gunnar Heinsohn projected that the Crusades were much more soon after the fall of Jerusalem. That this is something that I found incredibly significant and fascinating, was that, okay, Rome is this concept. Rome is not just Roman Italians. Rome is something entirely different than I think we've seen. Could be something similar as like an American empire, where we have places that are territories like the Philippines. So if we were going to use certain kinds of troops, the Romans used, like foreign legions would be there. They would conscript armies to go fight for them. So when they took Jerusalem down, you might have had Roman generals ruling over or directing armies that were not Italian people. So I think in our mind, we always think like these white European-looking Romans sacking Jerusalem. But what Gunnar Heinsohn said, and I think that credible historians have said, they used Arab nations to go trample Jerusalem. And that's what it says in Daniel. And I think that's what it says in Revelation 11, is that the holy city is given over to the nations, and they're going to trample on the holy city. So the Arabs, who also interesting, Gunnar Heinsohn put Muhammad potentially into the 1st century. And so you have these Arab Muslims coming into Jerusalem and destroying the city. And then later, you might have had Christians coming to take it back almost immediately. That's an interesting concept. I think that the truth of the matter is, I think without a doubt, they're lying about how that conflict went. Either lying about when it took place and ultimately the significance of it. Because typically when the Crusades are brought up, it's just to throw shade at Christians. The Christians haven't always done good things. What about the Crusades? What about the Crusades? What about the Crusades? That's what we always hear. What about the Crusades? But it makes more sense, too, that it wasn't separated from the times of Jesus by 1,000 years. That seems more crazy, is that nobody moved into Jerusalem for a long time afterwards, and then eventually Muslim Arabs moved in there, and then 500 years later, that's when Christians from Europe went in there to take it back. In that narrative, it does make it seem like religious zealots on the Christian side went in there just to kill brown people. That's what the narrative wants you to think. That's a lie. What do you think, John?
Yeah, I would agree. I think the story, the order has just been changed. And it is interesting, Gunnar Heinsohn and his research and talking about, the Romans making Millefiori glass, no one being around to show any of the Islamic world how to make it. And they recreated it almost perfectly, right? So it's like all these things had to have happened at the same time. And it also makes me wonder, who is the false prophet, right?
Right. Could that have been Muhammad?
Could Muhammad have been the false prophet that deceived them all?
That's
right?
a really interesting idea.
That would make more sense, if it were that way. But yeah, I don't believe that story for a second is the way that it actually went down.
Yeah, but to answer your question too, that could that have been Jesus ruling with a rod of iron? I think it could have been. I think that could have been something that happened in the millennial reign. Makes sense to me. Again, the way I read the book of Revelation, not everyone died during the events of Revelation. And so, yeah, that's what I believe, because if God took a people like the Israelites, who were not perfect, obviously far from it, to purge out more wicked enemies of the Lord, giant, corrupted bloodlines and evil nations, well, why couldn't it start the same way in the times of the millennial reign? Could that have been God ruling with a rod of iron? I think that's why maybe in the current view of history we have is the church is always dumped on, saying, oh, they were always wicked, they were always corrupt, they were always this and that. Read your books. Read the books of the Bible. The kings in Israel were often corrupt. Even the best ones were not very good. They were not perfect. So what if when Europeans who were Christians, right, whether they were good Christians or bad Christians, they were Christians, they came over and they purged out wicked nations in the Americas. Colonization's bad, right? That's what we're taught. But were the Europeans as bad as the people like the Aztecs who were sacrificing to demons on tops of pyramids? No, they were not that bad. So maybe that was God's judgment. Maybe that was God ruling with a rod of iron. So maybe it was something similar that was happening in Jerusalem, and it wasn't all bad. I think that, again, that it depends on your perspective on history, whether it was a good or bad thing. But we even know today that certain people read their Bible and they'll say, man, that God of the Old Testament sure was a genocidal maniac, right? And then we would say, no, he wasn't. God's just, God's good, and God is the same yesterday, today, and forever. So why would he be different during the millennial reign? I don't think it has to be different. I think it could be the same. So, all right, let's continue on the stream. Okay, Rockin' Royale says, what's your take on a guy like Edgar Cayce, a figure known as the sleeping prophet, and his claims to heal through clairvoyance, including accessing the condition of people's bodies and injuries? I know Brian's take, it's demons, bro. And I'm sure he's not wrong in some regard. LOL. You know what? I'm going to go with the simple answer is it's demons, bro. It's demons, bro. The sleeping prophet, obviously what's interesting, I'm not sure if Rockin' Royale knows that the Edgar Cayce Center is in Virginia Beach. That's where I'm born and raised. So that's a stone's throw of where I work, down at the oceanfront, Virginia Beach. So he's here. And so he had these very elaborate tales of Atlantis and the coming back of Atlantis and all these details about the mythical city of Atlantis. And it just so happens that Virginia Beach has one of the biggest statues of Neptune in the whole world, which I don't think is ironic or a coincidence. Down at our oceanfront, that Neptune, who in his Greek name is Poseidon. Poseidon is the one who supposedly founded Atlantis, and he had 10 sons who ruled over the place. And yeah, then it was judged by a flood. His Nephilim sons were judged eventually after the divine spirit dwindled in that place. But yeah, I think overall that God can give people prophetic visions and dreams and can talk to them, directly if he wants to. But when you're a clairvoyant and you claim to get these prophecies through your dreams that obviously are not 100% accurate and are nothing about God and Jesus and the one true way to go to heaven, it's safe to say that it came from the enemy and it came from demons, bro. What say you, John? Demons, bro, or nah?
First of all, I think Brian's awesome. I like Brian, right? I remember for a long time I thought Sylvia Brown was full of it, and I was like, this has got to be like just something that they're pulling our leg on, right? But she too said that she would contact entities that would give her information about where these people were buried or solving murders. So I think anybody could probably tap into that realm to be able to get information. And there's probably plenty of people who they come up with whatever name that they'd like for themselves, but they're probably just doing something that's pretty similar to the way everybody else is doing it.
Yeah, I would say that it's interesting that I've always got to bring it back to Lord of the Rings, but this is kind of timely. They have that company that's been coming out, that the surveillance thing, the Palantir or the Plantiri, that company.
Palantir, yeah.
Palantir or Palantiri. I think that's the way you say it in the Tolkien mythos. Well, in those, obviously, the Palantiri is some kind of a crystal ball. It's a seeing stone. And it can show you the future, but at the same time, it gives the enemy access to you when you use it. So, and also I think that you can be manipulated because you don't really know if it's true or not. Like, so how could you really know if it was true if you're getting from a source like that? I think that's probably likely what happens when you channel demons to get insight on the future. That was another interesting thing in Tolkien's world, is that the lesser gods could see some of the future, but there was mysteries that were hidden from them too, which makes perfect sense. Even if there was no funny business how Tolkien came up with all this stuff, it does correlate because, of course, they said he was a Catholic, that he would have maybe framed his story after what was truth. So the idea that like the devil does not know the whole story, or he did not know the whole story. He probably likely now knows the whole story, but he did not know the mysteries that God was keeping from them. Even in the book of Enoch, it mentions that the Watchers taught men mysteries, but they didn't even understand the deeper mysteries of God. So he taught them, the Watchers taught men worthless mysteries because they didn't really even understand. So yeah, you could see that these beings that are older than us can see the thing from maybe a broader perspective. They can sit back further and they can see a bigger part of the story. But they are not God. They are lesser gods. The one true God can see it all. And so, yeah, they could tell you kind of how it's supposed to go, but maybe they don't even know. So maybe even if they did want to tell you the truth, they don't even know because, again, they are not omnipotent. They can't be all places at once. And they're not outside of this place like the one true God is. So, yeah, it's demons, bro.
It's the best answer.
Yeah,
it really is,
bro. It's the most simple answer. But yeah, let's shoot. Okay, let's go to the next question. We've got a few more. We're looking like we're a little over 2 hours. So, okay, so Brown Knight. God bless you, Carmen. Thank you so much. Demons tell the truth too, but often use it to deceive. That's true. Again, that's a good point. Carmen says, thank you for the super chat, Carmen. Is that in much in the same way that the devil did tell some partial truths to Eve to deceive her. Not everything he said was a lie. It's kind of like saying, like, you're not going to die if you eat this. Not today.
Right.
You know, your eyes will be open. You'll be like us, which was sort of true, is that they were innocent. They didn't know the difference between good and bad. They couldn't tell the difference because all they knew was good until they did bad, and then they learned. So it's using a little bit of truth with a little bit of leaven in there in order to manipulate you. And I think it would be no different. The demons would do the exact same thing. So great call. Thank you for the super chat, Carmen. God bless you. Okay, it says Brown Knight 2208. Hi, JT. Are you open to make a live stream about meltology? Melted buildings are everywhere, but not just that everything inside the structures was destroyed, including billions of people. Thank you for your hard work. These guys are good. Yeah, I am absolutely open to the idea. It's kind of crazy that I haven't done a whole special on meltology yet. So yes, I would like an expert in that. It's kind of in the same way of like John was talking about. We're really fascinated with the architecture. I've told you guys over and over again that I really love going out west. I like going to see, like the God's nature, but sometimes it doesn't look all that natural. It looks like it could have been once maybe a red brick building out in Sedona, and now it looks like a lump of red stuff, Utah and all that stuff. So yes, I am absolutely down for that. I even teased before John agreed to come on, I was thinking about things I could talk about. And I'm gonna save something back. I've actually got a really good connection on meltology, but maybe if we do maybe even next week, if I can get somebody on here to talk meltology, we can do that. But that's a great idea. What are your thoughts on meltology, John? Are you interested in the topic?
Meltology is phenomenal. I think there's an account that I follow on Twitter called Grilled Cheese, and that's all they do or post about these melted structures that are all over the place and stamped bricks with dates on them. The elements shall melt like wax on the from the fervent heat on the day of the Lord. And so it does make me think, like, to your point of why is the Grand Canyon restricted? And maybe, just maybe, when Daniel has his vision, these are all subsequent kingdoms that wound up, or empires that wound up conquering each other, right? But maybe their reach was far and vast. And maybe those places were all, roasted when he came back. And there's just a mix of them all over the place, right? So maybe this is the reason why you hear the story of there's like Egyptian mummies or Egyptian stuff in the Grand Canyon, is because maybe that's just how far and vast that particular empire had gone. And the remnants are just still there and you can't go see it, right? So yeah, I think meltology is super cool.
Yeah, that's a great call, because I think that what's really interesting about that idea is that what if the real reason that places like the Grand Canyon would be restricted is because you have things that obviously got scorched on the outside, almost beyond recognition, but not totally beyond recognition, because these things still look like stuff. But they were so huge and so incredible that maybe there's pockets of preservation. What if there was so much there that it does kind of almost appear to be, if you guys have ever been to the Grand Canyon, that it looks like maybe that was once an ancient city. Maybe not ancient, but it was a city. And what if many people believe that the gold rush could have been, is maybe like the finding of like people's treasures, not like necessarily mining gold out of the ground, but like finding it. Maybe it could have been melted gold that got melted, as I was just saying, that if you had the story in Josephus that when the temple was burned down, gold melted into the foundations. Then the Roman soldiers had to pry it up. What if during that time, that cataclysm, that gold melted into the mountain and then they had to go mine it out? Or literally there's pockets of preservation where they're still trying to go through these vast cave systems to find all the gold and treasures that could still be hidden. What do you think, John?
Yeah, I 100% agree. I'm trying to remember the name of the person who did this exploration, but he basically said that there were chambers that he went into, there were mummified people, and that probably wouldn't fit along with the regular narrative of America being this brand new place. It just wouldn't go along with the story. So maybe the easiest thing to do is to just say that there's certain places that are off limits. It is interesting. The largest landowner in America is the U.S. government, right? And you think about every military base, you think about all the, there's a lot of golf courses, right? Like they have taken over a large amount of land that you will never be able to go to. And it does make me wonder what could be there that, you can't find.
Yeah, no question. What's interesting is there's a little nuance when people say that what they found in the Grand Canyon was Egyptian. What the story came, I want to say that it came from the Arizona Gazette, was an old story, and I want to say that it was like J.G. Kincaid was like the explorer that found it. It was sort of a mix of Egyptian kind of sounding things, but it was almost more like Hindu type things, like lotus flowers and something that almost sounded like a Buddha type thing that was in there. So it was like a mix of things. It was weird.
But still, that shouldn't be here.
Oh
right?
no question.
That should definitely, So this is like,
either way, I'm not trying to minimize it, but it's almost like more strange that would have had no connection with that. But that's what I always found that interesting, is that like the idea that we called the Native Americans Indians. And why would they call them Indians for so long when they know this is not India? It was only recently that they said, oh, we shouldn't call them that because that's politically incorrect. Right. I think the reason they called them Indian is because, hey, guess what? There's Indians here from India.
Right.
Like there is a remnant of people from, it would be like saying, hey, look, there's Italians here. Right. This isn't Italy. Yeah, we know it's not Italy, idiot. It's, but they're still from their ancestors are from Italy.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Yeah. Doesn't that make more sense that these people were not complete morons than when they said there's Indians here? From where? From America? No, their ancestors came from India. The Indians have these crazy mythologies about going into the earth, Shambhala, Agartha, and stuff like that. And then these Native Americans claim to come out from inside of the earth. That's kind of weird. That's kind of weird that it's like, is that why that they think that? Is because there is some truth to that. And again, another Lord of the Rings, Tolkien reference. I was watching the Hobbit series, and I thought that was really interesting. Again, to kind of go along with that, and then we'll maybe move to the next question, was that in that series, it's about Smaug, the dragon, who takes over this dwarf kingdom that's inside a mountain, right? It's inside the mountain, but it's obviously kind of built out on the outside, but it's mostly just like a mountain. But it's all built out on the inside with columns and statues and this vast amount of treasure. Unbelievable riches inside this mountain. But lots of it was burned by a dragon. Is that kind of like a soft disclosure that fire prevents people from getting in to get this old treasure that was mined by dwarves? You know what I mean? I'm not saying they were necessarily dwarves, but you know what I'm saying? Like that.
Sure.
Fire inside of a mountain, vast riches, things that are forbidden because of the danger involved in trying to go back and claim this treasure. I don't know. Just saying. Just saying, could there be something there?
Yeah.
Okay, so it's a new creature. Why isn't the topic talked about in normie churches? I'm guessing he's talking about the short season.
Yeah.
And why do so many I personally talk to get combative or defensive? I live in the LU area, and it's hard having rational conversations sometimes. I assume incorrectly that faith-based Bible readers took Jesus at his word. People try to pick and choose through the Bible about what is spiritual allegory and what is fact. why don't you take this one, John? I'll give you the opportunity to have first word on this. What do you think that people get so combative and defensive, and it's hard to have rational conversations with people about the subject?
Yeah, I think maybe like if I were to think about the first time that this topic was told to me, I think pride, my own pride that I knew the right answer, was probably the main thing that kept me from wanting to like listen to what somebody had to say. So I think maybe number one, it's pride. And then I think number two, this does not align with the dispensational view. So if you were to have this open discussion about this, well, where would that lead the congregation to next? And, if the idea is that you need to lead everybody in a season of deception for them to think that Jesus is still coming back, right? He didn't do what he said he was going to do. I guess you kind of lose control of that narrative, right? So I'm sure it's like a heresy in some places for someone to talk about this, that like, no, he already came back and, we're past 1,000 years and all that other stuff. And I think it's just maybe it just comes down to pride of, I have to be right. This has to be the right way. And I couldn't be wrong about it. Or how could we all be wrong about it?
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely part of it. I think that I think the truth of the matter is that people are not really reading the Bible for themselves. I think that they've obviously put a lot of faith in other people, and it's tough for them to probably admit that they could be wrong about these things. We often say that the reason why that we have learned things is because we admitted that we're wrong. The first thing is you notice that lots of people were wrong in our lives, so we're telling us what's true. And then you eventually have to be introspective on yourself and saying, like, a lot of things that I believed are wrong. And why do I have things wrong? A lot of times it's because we want things to be true. It's not because that we are unable mentally to figure things out. It's because we have a blind spot because we want something to be true. And I think that's the real reason people are combative. It's because they think this place sucks and we don't necessarily disagree, and they want to be raptured out of this place. Now, the issue could be that, maybe that's not how the story goes. So if you tell people that there's no Santa Claus when they're kids, they get upset with you. So, but there's no Santa Claus. Santa Claus is not giving you presents and things like that. So that's a lie. And even though you think it's fun and it makes Christmas more fun, it's still not the truth. And I think that's the real truth of the matter, is that most of these people want there to be a rapture, whether it's before the tribulation or after the tribulation or during the tribulation. But I said, I think that what people really need to just wrap their minds around is the fact that God never promised you a rapture. God promised you a resurrection. That what people always knew, even in the times of Jesus, is that there was going to be a resurrection of the dead. So, because again, people, whether you believe that the rapture is in the past or it's in the future, you would have to believe that people have not experienced one, at least for a while. If you believe it was in the first century, or you believe it hasn't happened yet, everyone who's died has not experienced the rapture. So that's the real reason people get combative, is because their faith is in something they've been taught that they want to be true. Itching ear doctrines. So whether we're wrong or we're right, that nobody's experienced the rapture yet, then maybe your faith should not be in the rapture. Your faith should be in Jesus. It should be in eternal life. It should be in the resurrection. And so I think that's why I think people are upset when you ask them questions about it, or you want to just broach the topic like, what if you're wrong about some of these things? I think that it's totally fair to talk about that, but at the same time, I get why people are resistant, and that's why I don't bring it up to everybody. I know there's people in my life that don't want to talk about this subject. They're not open to it. They know it's out there. They're just not. One day they might be willing to look. But I think that people have blind spots. I'm sure I still have some blind spots. And if they're not willing, I don't think you should force those conversations. They got to come to those conclusions of their own. But as I said before, I don't think eschatology is necessarily a salvation issue. But I do think that when you see it kind of put in, maybe in the deceptive ways that things like dispensationalism can be pushed, you see where it can be really dangerous spiritually and physically when you're supporting things that Christians should not support, like the stuff, again, that's happening in the Middle East right now. Okay, let's go. We got 3 more questions, I think, maybe 2. Okay, it says we've got Chris Moran, 1, 2, 3, 4. The Tartarian buildings we see weren't churches, nor were they built by 1,000-year reign of angels. Just a reminder that Jesus Yeshua's kingdom is not of this world, so it isn't physical. Besides, Yahweh's commandment to not have or worship false idols would be violated, as these buildings are covered with statues of people clearly not Jesus or Mary or gargoyles or other abominations. Do you think that this was the beginning of Satan's little season, or do you think these buildings were leftovers? I think it could be a combination of the two. I think that, for one, lots of the iconography are angels. So you could say that's idolatry, but if you think about it, who told the Israelites to put angels on top of the Ark of the Covenant? You know, the Holy Ark. God told Moses, this is what it's supposed to look like. It should have angels on the top of it. So this is the thing. And actually I saw a video, and I'm not going to mention this content creator's name because honestly, I just can't stand this person. Doesn't mean I don't love him, but I can't stand him, so I'm not going to give them it. When you see the stuff that the modern Catholic Church does, it's idolatry. A lot of the things they do are idolatrous. But just because things they make are beautiful does not mean it was always meant for worship, if that makes sense. That you could make a beautiful building. Even the original temple had cherubs inside the Holy of Holies. They were obviously just statues. You know, knowing the difference between what should be there because it's a symbol of something that's in heaven does not mean you should worship it. But true, there's lots of things that don't just look totally pagan or evil. But I think that's the interesting thing. I said, to think of the idea that what if some of these gods that were worshipped as false gods were what angels actually look like? And it's not necessarily there for them to be worshipped. It's just to show that these beings existed. I don't know. What's also possible is that I mention over and over again that the Greco-Roman buildings likely were Greco-Roman. So if those were Greco-Roman buildings, then it's likely that they would have had the pantheon of gods on there. And those were left over. Those are remnants. You don't see those things. I mean, I guess you do see some gargoyles on Catholic churches. But again, that might be symbols of like the demons cannot get into this place. They're on the outside of the building. I don't know. What do you think, John? What's your answer to that question?
Yeah. So, a part of me thinks about Exodus 20 verse 4, where you shall not make yourself a carved image or any likeness of anything that is in heaven above, or that's in the earth beneath, or that's in the water under the earth. And so when these watchers decided that they were going to leave their first estate, maybe they built things that are in the likeness of what they saw in heaven. And maybe some of these places, with 30-foot tall doors, right, are just these creations of these demigods as a way to be worshipped, or as a way to be able to, show their power. But I also think that maybe, I think that a lot of these buildings are leftovers from another kingdom, right? Like you having Roman cement inside of U.S. Capitol building is really weird. I don't know how you would figure out how to do that in the 1800s and then forget how to do it. Nobody else can do it. It'd be more likely that that was a Roman building that has Roman cement that no one can make. And then number two, I'm thinking all these gargoyle things, it could be added after the fact. You know, it's a possibility. I don't know. You know, I don't really have a definitive thing on that, but I do find it interesting that the Roman cement, it's kind of like a dead giveaway to me that like we didn't make this stuff either, because the geopolymers that we have today, they don't compare to that Roman cement.
Yes, yeah, that's a third possibility, that they were neither before, during, but after. Because if some people believe these buildings were literally created in the last 150 years, then it's not too outlandish to think that they could have put a statue or two on the outside of them, including like a gargoyle or something like that. The
Sure.
superstitious people afterwards. Again, see, I'm not of the mindset that saints built these buildings or necessarily angels built them. And what that person also asked was that we know that God's kingdom, the kingdom that Jesus was talking about, was not of this world. It was a spiritual concept that he was trying to impart on people. What I've said almost from the beginning was, I was saying that I think it's possible that without the devil's hindrance, man could do more. And so it wasn't necessarily saints doing these things, it was men doing them, who these men still would not be perfect. So they could have still made mistakes, and they could have still fallen in the trap, ultimately, of idolatry by not quite understanding all of it. That's my thought process on there. So I think we got a couple more. Let's see. We got sorry, keep going on the wrong screen. Okay, somebody said over here, they said Jason Booth 3972. First of all, I'm one of your biggest fans, but I just wanted to say, with love, the new pentagrams on your mixtape cover are kind of cringy. Just saying. Not like the people who saw the brick background and said you were a Freemason, laugh out loud. Just want to be honest, it gives me a weird vibe. Okay, let me explain the pentagrams. Some people just call them stars. Pentagram is literally just a 5-pointed star. So there's no circles, there's no goat heads on them. They don't have circles around them. The reason they're stars is because I always say, pretty much every mixtape I say, if you like these podcasts and you're listening on Apple or Spotify, give me a 5-star review. I would challenge anyone to find anything you can review that does not have the 5-pointed star, if it's a star system. So that's the only reason I put the stars up there, because I like to visualize the things I'm saying when I make edits to videos. So it's not a satanic thing. And I think that I used to always think that the 5-pointed star, the pentagram, was just inherently evil. But what I also have learned a little bit more, kind of in the same way that when you first wake up to a lot of the deception and the evil, you attribute every symbol or pattern to the enemy. But what I think the pentagram actually is, it is, for one, it's just a geometric pattern that's repeated in God's creation. God's fingertips are on everything that's created. So the enemy would have knowledge of this. And this is where, like, you get into the esoteric stuff, like the Pythagorean theorem and all that stuff. It's an understanding of how God has put patterns in things and them being able to recreate these things through geometry. So the star pentagram in itself is not evil. The intent of the person in the secret club likely is. You know what I'm saying? Does that make sense? That you can have like the Fibonacci pattern and stuff like that. That's in nature. That was God spoke that into existence. So identifying patterns in the geometry that God had created is not in itself evil. It's always the intent. Thoughts, John? Do you have any thoughts on the pentagrams that I use in my videos?
You know, I could see how it would be concerning to somebody, right? I guess maybe when you've realized that like the world is coded in symbolism, you kind of start looking for it everywhere. I remember, one time when I first started out doing this, I had a stream, and there was like a gouty bull that I got when I was on vacation with my wife. And everybody immediately said, oh, this guy is
Oh
from
yeah,
the
the bull in the background,
bull
right?
cult and all this other stuff, and it's like, wow, man, so I get it. I totally understand it. I've put together the fact that the Pentagon is the interior of a pentagram, and like I've gone down all these things of recognizing stuff, but you know to each his own. And I could see the making people think about the stars and the putting the 5 stars. I could see it. It doesn't bother me. I'm not concerned or worried about it.
Yeah,
but
so it's obviously an effect.
think-
It's an effect from my CapCut software. I used to try to actually put the 5 stars, but this was actually faster. And because these videos are thrown up really fast, they're the uncensored edit, the cuts. You don't get like the snappy all the people and all the things I put on the thumbnails for YouTube. So this is what you get. Sometimes you just get the freeze frame of it. You can believe me or not believe me.
It could also be
not satanic.
Right? And if we want to really, strap in the conspiracy helmet, it could be whoever made that software decided that we were going to put that in there and that we were going to have those, right? So it's, I guess you can go any way with it, right? But I don't think you wrote that software, did you, JT?
Well, no, I mean, the truth is, though, that, again, I was saying that the reason I use that effect is because when you have to give somebody a rating on Apple or Spotify, or, I mean, like, let's say if it's Amazon, you're rating a product. It's rated in stars, right? What kind of star? It wasn't the Star of Data or the Star of Rephim. It was just like, it's a 5-pointed star. That's just what they use. So, I mean, again, to some people, all things are evil. Some things all things are holy. I think that there's a little in between, because I think that, again, it's a geometric pattern. It can be represented as evil, or it can be. I've learned to become agnostic with some things just being just kind of the way they are. But we don't worship the stars. We understand that God made them. So let's see. We got. I think we have one. I think that might have been the last comment. Oh, actually, somebody said last comment here. It says Joan Sullivan. Let me see. Joan Sullivan. 4959. Would you watch this short video? It's Revelation 10 partially fulfilled on 9/11. I will try to watch it later. Probably not tonight. but with that being said, was there anything else you wanted to get to? We've been going for 2.5 hours, John. It's obviously, it seems like it's flown by.
Listen, I just wanted to just say, that, if you're on a path of trying to share God with people, and you find that the father of distraction, the father of lies, is figuring out a way to keep you from doing it, just keep doing it. I've been away for maybe 3 months. I probably have enough free time to be able to do something, and I'll definitely make sure I do more. But don't don't stop talking to people about it. And I look forward to another episode. I I was going to bring something up today, but we didn't have enough time for it. But all the myths about like Medusa turning people into stone, and some of the sculptures and things that you see from the Renaissance period. Maybe we can talk about that next time, because something tells me, just like the buildings, there's something going on with those sculptures where it's just that it didn't happen the way they told us it happened.
Yeah, that's a good thing. I wish you'd have brought that up when we were talking about the gargoyles and the iconography, because that is interesting. Because I know Brian and I, on the JT's mixtape that we released Monday, we were talking about C.S. Lewis and The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, the Chronicles of Narnia, and how it was the evil witch was freezing people. And so Aslan breathes life into the ones who were not bad. But I imagine if you froze somebody who was not good, they would have stayed frozen. So what if, yeah, that's a Medusa type thing. That's a Gorgon issue. And yeah, that people did, like, could that have really happened? Like, what do you think? Like, do you think that's a,
Yeah, I mean,
it's like, what if those demons were frozen on the outsides of those cathedrals?
it could be. I mean, it's very. I think I want to say the one that really blew me away was called Deception, and it's a guy with a fishing net, and so he's holding this fishing net, and all of this is made out of marble. So, the just muscles, moving a hand a certain way and being able to capture that specific, muscle movement on the arm. It's just it's so lifelike and realistic. You really wonder, like, did someone really do that with a chisel and a hammer? A marble fishnet?
No, I know exactly what you mean. Yeah, we'll have to share some example. That's a great topic. We talked about that the statues are incredible, like not believable incredible. Like, how could they do that with
No way.
with like it almost looking like cloth? You can see transparent fabric where you could still see the detail and the wrinkles in the clothing. It is incredible. But yeah, on that note, guys, I really appreciate you guys hanging out with us. Yeah, once again, guys, please, if you guys want to support this channel, check out Modern Roots Life. You can support me by potentially supporting your health. Win-win for both of us. And if you want a shirt, link in the description, multiple colors. Actually, somebody mentioned, I think, was it Jesus is Lord 70 AD, asked about the baby blue ones. I still have a limited quantity of the old shirts. You have to email me directly. But at this point, I really only have smalls and mediums. I have a few baby blue smalls and green mediums. I've got less than 10 total. But I'm open to the idea that we could have a throwback and I could get some more of those. But if you guys want like the current shirts, they're all available. You guys check out the website, jtfollowsjc.com, or check out the link in the description. You guys can get small through XXX. You can get all the colors, not the baby blue, not the green that I wear sometimes, but you can get that. And the hats might be on the horizon. And also, yeah, guys, check out the new episode of JT's mixtape, episode number 36, early and uncensored, now available on Patreon. So if you guys are trying to check out the JT's mixtapes early, and again, you want to support me, that's a great way to do it. I really appreciate all you guys, appreciate you guys members, appreciate all the super chats here today. You guys are awesome. And please check out my brother, John, Little Season John, or Short Season John. Check out his channel. John, tell people where they can find you on all the things.
Yeah, short Season John, JON. You can find me on Twitter, YouTube. Linktree will bring you to both places. But yeah, I appreciate it. I thank you, JT. It's always wonderful talking to you. Hopefully one day I'll run into you somewhere and shake your hand, give you a hug. But you're a great guy. Great thing that you're doing here, and it's always a pleasure, brother. It's awesome.
Yeah, the pleasure's mine, brother. Yeah, absolutely, man. Yeah, hopefully tonight. Yeah, I know you said you've been busy, but hopefully maybe this will give you some encouragement, because I'm sure people, they enjoyed. I heard a lot of positive things about your stuff with the World Fairs, and this is obviously, again, like you're welcome back on, because every time I have you on, it's so easy to talk to you. And it's hard to believe we've been going for nearly 4 hours now, or 3 hours now, nearly 3 hours now. So it went by really fast, but I appreciate you guys dearly. You guys are the best. We got the best community in the business here. We love you guys. We'll see you on the next one. God bless y'all.